Ito ang Bombo Radyo Philippines. Fully digitalized. Numero 1 sa balita, komentaryo, drama at serbisyo publiko. Bombo Radyo Philippines.
Bombo Radyo Philippines.
Unmatched. Number 1 and most trusted source of news and information.
Basta Radio Bombo.
This is Bombo Radio Philippines and we're broadcasting live at Bombo Radio Broadcast Center, Makati City, Philippines. Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, pansamantala muna tayong papatlang sa mga regular na palatuntunan ng Bombo Radio Philippines upang bigyang daan ang ating special coverage kaugnay ho ng confirmation of charges hearing dyan sa International Criminal Court. Sa kabuuan ng ating coverage ay meron ho tayong makakausap direkta mula ho dyan sa The Hague sa bahagi ng Netherlands at gayon din yung mga supporters ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte mula naman ho dyan sa bahagi ng Davao City. Maging sa ilang monitoring areas kung saan ay may viewing ng idinaraos ho na aktibidad doon sa The Hague ay meron din ho tayong mga update mamaya lamang. At of course, yung mga abogado ho na may partisipasyon dito sa mga usapin may kinalaman kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte ay atin hong makakaugnayan sa pamamagitan ng ating communication lines. At live nationwide via satellite mula dito sa Bombo News Center, Makati. This is Bombo Radio Philippines and we're live at mamaya tuloy-tuloy tayo hanggang sa coverage po ng ating mga kaganapan dyan sa The Netherlands. Una sa ating mga balita ay pinagsisisihan ni Metropolitan Manila Development Authority General Manager Nicolas Torre III ang kanyang malaking ginampanang papel sa naging pag-aresto kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Ayon kay Torre, ang kanyang ginawa ay bahagi lamang ng tungkulin bilang opisyal ng batas at walang halong personal na motibo. Si Torre, mga kabombo, na dating hepe ng Philippine National Police bago na italaga bilang General Manager ng Metropolitan Manila Development Authority nito lamang Disyembre ng taong 2025 ay naging pangunahing personalidad na naging instrumento sa pagkakadala kay dating Pangulong Duterte sa The Hague doon sa bahagi ng Netherlands. Simula ngayon, mga kabombo, ay isasalang na nga sa confirmation of charges na hearing dyan sa International Criminal Court kaugnay ng libu-libong kaso ng extrajudicial killings na iniuugnay sa War on Drugs campaign ng nakalipas na administrasyon. Sa kabila ng mga batikos mula ho sa mga taga-suporta ng dating presidente, nanindigan naman si Torre na ang kanyang naging aksyon ay Call of Duty at hindi personal na laban. Kasabay nito ay nagsagawa ng mga kilos protesta ang ilang grupo sa labas ng International Criminal Court hanggang sa mga oras po na ito bilang pagpapakita naman ng suporta para sa panig ng dating presidente. Ayon naman sa mga human rights advocates, ang pag-usad ng kaso ay mahalagang hakbang para ho sa hustisya na makakamit ng pamilya ng mga biktima kung papabor sa kanila ang naturang desisyon ng mga hukom doon sa International Tribunal. Naniniwala naman si Torre maging ang ilang opisyal ng Simbahang Katolika na ang International Criminal Court ay nagbigay ng pag-asa sa mga Pilipinong patuloy ho na nakikipaglaban para sa proteksyon ng karapatang pantao at ating antabayanan. Ang mga update naman dyan sa bahagi po ng The Hague. Sa puntong ito ng ating balitaan, kuha tayo ng mga kaganapan naman dyan sa bahagi ng lungsod ng Maynila. Ilang mga taga-suporta kasi ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte may mga panawagan sa Korte Suprema at yung nalikom na libu-libong pirma ay sinumiti na ho para umapila na maaksyonan yung nakabinbing petisyon upang maiuwi ang dating Pangulo sa ating bansa. Alamin natin ang mga balita hatid ni Bombo Hilario.
Yes, Bombo Dennis, nagsagawa ngayong araw ang ilang mga taga-suporta ni former President Rodrigo Duterte ng demonstrasyon sa tapat ng katas-tasang hukuman, lungsod ng Maynila. Mangilan-ilang individual ang siyang nagpakita ng kanilang emosyon at lalo ng pagsuporta sa dating Pangulo ng bansa. Sa panayam sa isa sa mga taga-suporta na si Wendell Martin Cabrera, ang co-convener ng DBS Raul Confederation, ibinahagi niyang paniniwalang hindi nararapat para kay Duterte ang nararanasan na sitwasyon. Kasalukuyan kasing nakadedene ang dating Pangulo sa The Hague, Netherlands dahil sa kasong kinakarap patungkol sa implementasyon ng war on drugs. Naharap siya sa partikular na kasong crimes against humanity sa International Criminal Court. Git pa ni Wendell Cabrera na hindi makatarungan ang pagkakaresto kay dating Pangulong Duterte at agarang pagdala tungo ibang bansa nang hindi dumadaan sa lokal na korte ng Pilipinas. Ito ang rason kung bakit sinimulan nila ang inisyatibong kumalat na malagda para sa panawagan pagpapalaya sa dating Pangulo. Narito at ating pakinggan si Wendell Martin Cabrera, ako convener ng DDS Confederation, taga-suporta ni dating Pangulong Duterte.
Because we feel that the Supreme Court right now is the last bastion of sanity in this government, no? Wala na tayong ibang choice ngayon at saka pag-asa ngayon It's just the Supreme Court and we are kasi alam naman ng lahat ng mga Filipino ngayon all over the country and even outside the country right now that there is really a grave injustice that was done to the former President Rodrigo Duterte. No? He was illegally kidnapped and handed over to a foreign country without submitting him to local courts. No? And so that's why people on the ground, no, without the initiative of without the support of big politicians, no, these are grassroots people right now who are taking this initiative to initiate a signature campaign.
Signature campaign ng mga grupo at individual taga-suporta ni dating Pangulong Duterte. Ibinagi pa ni Wendell Cabrera na ito ay kanilang isinumite sa Korte Suprema. Apelaan niya nila sa katasasang hukuman na iresolba na nito ang mga petisyon na kabinbin may kinalaman sa pambansang issue. Kabilang narito ang mga petisyon inahin kumukestyon sa legalidad ng pagkakaresto kay former President Duterte nang ito'y dalhin sa International Tribunal. Ibinagi pa niya na tanging Korte Suprema na lamang umano ang kanilang pag-asa upang ito'y malinaw o di kaya umaasang maiuwi sa Pilipinas ang dating Pangulo. Muli si Wendell Martin Cabrera, isa sa mga taga-suporta ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte.
That the Supreme Court right now is the last bastion of sanity in this government, no? Wala na tayong ibang choice ngayon at saka pag-asa ngayon It's just the Supreme Court and we are very happy that the people behind, no, this building behind me right now are doing their job very well and we are praying. So that's why we are calling on all peace-loving Filipinos right now to support peacefully this initiative na sana mapauwi natin si former President Duterte. He is the most loved. And
paglilinaw naman ng grupo na hindi layon ng isinumiting apilas na diktahan ng Korte Suprema hinggil sa gagawin nitong aksyon. Sumalita nila ay hiling lamang nila rito na manahigang katarungan at mapanatili ang matatag na pundasyon ng konstitusyon ng bansang Pilipinas. Nag-uulat live mula dito sa lungsod ng Maynila. Ito si Bombo Radyo and this is Bombo Radyo Philippines, the number one and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radyo, Bombo!
Nalangin mga kabombo at paghikayat itong si Senator Christopher Bongo para sa publiko na manatiling mahinahon ngayong araw kasabay huya ng formal na pagsisimula ng confirmation of charges hearing ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court. Sa inilabas na pahayag, ipinaabot ng mambabatas ang kanyang suporta para sa dating Pangulo na naharap nga sa kasong crimes against humanity kaugnay ng kontrobersyal na kampanya kontra sa ilegal na droga ng nakaraang administrasyon. Ipinapanalangin din ng senador ang pagkakaroon ng dating Pangulo ng tibay ng kalooban at kapanatagan at pati na ng mabuting kalusugan. Hinihiling din ng senador na magtiwala ang mga taga-suporta sa umiiral na sistema ng hustisya. Matatandaan na si Go ay kilala na malapit sa dating presidente mula pa nang ito ay alkalde ng lungsod ng Davao. At tinukoy din siya ng International Criminal Court bilang co-perpetrator sa nasabing war on drugs campaign, bagay na kanya namang mariing pinabulaanan. Gaganapin nga ang pagdinig mula ngayong araw hanggang sa 27 ng Pebrero dyan sa bahagi ng The Hague sa Netherlands. Kaugnay nito ay nanawagan din si Go para naman sa kalayaan ng dating punong ehekutibo. Sa bahaging ito mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, ay i-check natin ang atin pang ibang mga kasamahan sa bahagi naman po ng lungsod ng Maynila o dyan sa Palasyo Malacanang mismo kung paano naman yung ginagawa na monitoring ng panig ng Malacanang and of course yung kampo nitong si former President Rodrigo Duterte sa bahagi ng Davao City. At mamaya din mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, makakausap po natin sa pamamagitan ng ating communication line ang isa sa mga petitioner doon sa writ of habeas corpus na inihain dyan sa Korte Suprema para sa pagpapauwi dito kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Maya-maya lamang yan mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation sa tuloy-tuloy nating balitaan. Samantala, eto muna mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. Kuha tayo ng ilang impormasyon direkta mula ho dyan sa The Hague. Itong isa ho sa mga kababayan natin na nananatili na ho dyan sa The Netherlands, si Ginoong Joel Vega, ay makakausap din po natin. At yan ho ay may kinalaman doon sa kanilang obserbasyon at iba pang mga kaganapan dyan sapagkat naririyan ho sila sa bahagi po ng Netherlands. Sa mga sandaling ito, natin hong makakadaupang palad sa himpapawid. We'll check the line of Bombo Radyo Davao and makakuha po tayo, baka may matanong ho tayo among those Davaoenyo, anong reaction nila dito sa pag-usad na ng kaso ni former President Rodrigo Duterte na kanilang kababayan dyan. At of course, former President yan. Malaking usapin at tiyak na pag-uusapan ho ito sa mga susunod na araw, hindi lamang dito sa Pilipinas, kundi maging sa ibayong dagat ay laman ho ito ng mga balita dahil nga sa malaking development o mga pag-usad ng kanyang kinakaharap na kaso. And of course, mamaya mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, may action na rin dyan sa Kamara de Representantes kaugnay ho dun sa impeachment case laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte. Mukhang nagkaroon na ho ng ilang development. Kukunin natin ang linya dyan ng atin hong reporter sa bahagi ng Kongreso upang makibalita ho dito sa panibagong development sa impeachment charges laban naman kay Vice President Sara Duterte na ngayon ay may mga kinakaharap po na kaso at kung ano ang kahihinatnan ho ng naturang mga complaint na inihain initially laban ho sa kanya, pero ito ay subject for consolidation dahil kabi-kabila po yung mga reklamo na ipinupukol laban po sa kanya, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. Nariyan din mamaya makakausap natin ang isa sa mga dating appointee nitong si dating Pangulong Duterte mula sa Anti-Corruption Agency ng nakalipas na administrasyon. Pero bago ho yan mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation, unahin lamang natin itong makakapanayam natin dyan sa The Hague. Kapiling natin sa ating linya ng komunikasyon at makakausap natin sa mga oras na ito si Ginoong Joel Vega, Filipino born, pero nandyan na ho siya sa bahagi ng Netherlands. By the way, si Bombo Jamito po ito at live tayo dito sa Bombo Radio Philippines sa mga oras na ito. At kumusta ho kayo dyan? Ano ang nakatakda ho ng mga programa na inyong na-monitor o kaya naman ay nabatid mula dyan sa inyong pagtutok din sa mga kaganapan dyan sa The Hague, Ginoong Vega?
Meron kaning marcha din mula sa center ng Den Haag to the ICC. Mag-umpisa ng 7:30 hanggang 9 o'clock. At yung hearing ang mag-umpisa ng 9 o'clock, matatapos na doon kasi hindi na allowed. Mag-monitor kami ng live stream from 10 a.m. And then sa Wednesday, walang hearing. Meron namang protest action sa station ng Den Haag. Which is about the February 25 EDSA revolution, people power, commemoration. Sa Thursday, merong misa sa hapon, kasama yung mga family din ng mga victims hanggang Friday na merong press conference ulit doon sa Den Haag na organizational matters ang pag-uusapan. And sa Sunday next week, yun ang last na press conference. So maraming activities doon sa opposition or those critical of the Duterte EJK cases.
Okay. Sa panig naman ho ng mga supporters ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, pero ba kayong nabalitaan na anumang mga activities din ho kasabay nito ang confirmation of charges hearing?
ICC din from 9 o'clock. Kasi yung opposition from 7:30 to 9. Tapos sila ay from 9 to hindi ko alam kung anong oras. Lahat ng rally na to, pro-Duterte or opposition, kailangan ng permit. So, merong mga permit yan. Kung walang permit, hindi kayo pwedeng mag-assemble, lalo na kung malaking grupo. Kaya yung mga kapulisyan ng Den Haag ay na-anticipate na inaabangan na yan. Kasi alam naman nila na malaki yung grupo. So, meron silang mga police measures. Katulad noong September 23 last year na merong mga police na Den Haag medyo malaki kaysa dati, naka-ready for anything na that can disturb the order, traffic or whatever. So inaasahan yan ng kapulisyan ng munisipyo ng The Hague. Yung mga rallies ng Pro Duterte na maliliit lang na informal ay usually yata nakikita ko sa kanilang social video post doon yung sa isang side street sa malapit sa ICC. Kasi since last year, hindi sila napayagan doon sa park na mas malaki kasi may reklamo from the residents na medyo maingay at saka medyo nakakaabala doon sa traffic. Kaya lumipat sila since last year doon sa isang side street na malapit sa ICC na merong maliit na table doon sa tabi ng isang bicycle lane. Pero itong last Thursday, Friday, nakita ko sa isang social media post na niligpit din nila yung table. Siguro kasi matagal na nakaharang doon sa bicycle lane. Mga Dutch pa naman ay napaka busisi sa bicycle lanes kasi yan ang kanilang ginagamit na transportation dito sa Holland.
Okay. Pero so far, hindi po naman ba pinapatigil ng Dutch government yung lahat ng mga rally na sinasagawa? Lalo na may ilang mga pagkakataon na nagkakaroon ng gulo among themselves, yung mga pro-Duterte people at siguro pati yung mga anti for some instances. Ano ho ang obserbasyon po ninyo dyan?
Hindi. Kasi alam mo, dito sa Holland, they respect yung freedom to assemble and speak. As long as it follows yung rules, yung municipal or national regulations or city regulations. If you follow that, pwedeng mag-rally at kung may permit, lalo na sa malaking mga assembly. Pero kung maliliit, kagaya yung mga Pro-Duterte gatherings, maliliit yun, hindi na kailangan kasi mga 5 lang kayong tao o 10, pwede na yon. Pero kung malaking gathering, may mga regulations na at saka kailangan ng permit. Hindi naman pinagbabawalin dito.
I see. Better na ganun may mga protocol pa rin po na umiral. What about yung naunahong naging bangayan ng ilang faction ng pro-Duterte group, wala naman ho itong naging kumbaga epekto doon sa paghingi ng permit. At kasi parang may ilang pagkakataon na naobserbahan kami na nagkaroon ng kaguluhan. May biro pa nga na dahil sa pagkain yung ilan sa mga insidente, nagkakasigawan sila and nagiging agaw pansin dun sa mga ibang mga lahi na nakakaobserba. Ano ang inyong impormasyon hinggil dito?
Well, last year may insidente na nag-awa yung within the Pro-Duterte followers na medyo nagkatulakan sila. Kaya may nag-report yata sa pulis, tumakbo yung pulis doon sa lugar. So pinatigil sila. Kasi siyempre, once tumawag sa pulis, they would respond to that. So yun ang ginawa ng pulis. Last year yun, tama, na may incidenting ang ganun. Pero that is within the followers of the Duterte camp. At saka anyone na may tatawag sa pulis, siyempre iti-check kung valid ba yung call for help. May tumawag, nag-respond yung pulis. Mga 5 pulis yata ang dumating in 3 cars, and then they stop, they ask the people to be calm. So yun ang umpisa. Kung mauulit yon within the group, kahit sa aming side or sa kanilang side, siyempre mag-responde yung police hypothetically. Yes. Well,
okay, ito lamang ho, open po ito pala sa public, itong hearing po na ito. So kayo ba personal magtutungo kayo dyan sa event? Ilang oras na lamang ho, o ilang sandali na lang ang ating hinihintay. Kayo ho ba'y makikibahagi mismo?
Oo, kasi ang rules ng hearing is that first come, first serve. Open to the public, but it's first come, first serve. So, na-expect namin na malaki yung interest from both sides, pro and opposition to the Duterte. So, first come, first serve. Mahirap pumasok, walang telephone allowed. So, pilahan, first come, first serve nga. So, pupunta ako sa 7:30 March to the ICC grounds hanggang 9 o'clock. Pero hindi kami hindi ako nakakasigurado kung makakapasok. Kasi by the time 9 o'clock, dapat nakapila ka na before 9. Akaring hindi ka makakapasok kasi very limited po yung seats doon sa gallery. Kasi mayroong press, tapos meron din yung mga representatives ng kung anong organizations, at yung family pa. Kaya medyo limited din seats, baka 10 lang siguro for the public. So talagang mahirap makapasok. At hindi rin ako umaasa na makapasok. Kaya ang gagawin po namin, mag-monitor po kami dun sa live stream na sa alam ko ay may 30-minute delay. Basta sila ng 9 o'clock, makikita lang yung video stream from the website of the ICC 30 minutes later.
Okay, so kayo bilang observer na rin, yung mga malalaking kaganapan ay tinuturing dito sa Pilipinas, kagaya ho ng kaso ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Ito ho ba, I'm just curious, nagiging mga banner headline din po ba ito dyan sa mga balita, mga pinag-uusapan dyan ho sa the Netherlands? Tulad ho dito sa atin kasi talagang pagka Duterte pinag-usapan, talk of the town, and of course yan ho ang pinakang sentro minsan ng pinagtatalo-talunan ng atin ho mga kababayan. How about dyan sa Dahig?
Kasi po ang Dutch media ay concentrated doon sa European and Dutch national news. So, since ito ay confirmation, medyo iba sa last year, medyo may interest. Pero depende po yan kung anong news lineup for the day. At kung mayroong malalaking news na nangyari, may tendency na maisang tabi. Pero kung medyo tahimik, merong pwede siguro masasama siguro sa lineup, pero hindi po masyadong malalim ang interest ng Dutch public, lalo na ito ay parang preliminary hearing. At isa pang nangyari na hindi a-attend si Duterte at pinayagan din ng ICC na hindi siya attend. So sa ganung paraan yung interest, visual interest, wala siya doon, medyo bumaba. So, pero kahit pa attend siya, ang mga Dutch po ay hindi nakatutok doon sa narrative or news ni Duterte about, EGK. Depende na lang po kung mayroong malaking development, or siguro kung matutuloy sa trial at siya ay pupunta sa first day ng trial in the future pagkatapos nitong confirmation hearing, baka po tumaas yung attention ng Dutch media or international media sa usapang ito.
Okay, with that, maraming salamat po sa pagtugon sa aming mga katanungan kahit kayo man ay nakatutok din ho dyan sa mga kaganapan sa Dahiga. Siguro, baka maya-maya ay muli namin kayo makausap dito sa mga after nito mga development po na ito. Thank you so much.
Salamat.
Ayan, nakausap po natin mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation si Ginoong Joel Vega. Isa ho siyang Filipino-Dutch national at matagal na ho dyan, ilang dekada na rin ho siyang naninirahan dyan sa the Netherlands at yan ho yung kanyang obserbasyon dyan sa mga kaganapan sa bahagi po ng Dahig. Kaugnay ng usapin sa International Criminal Court ng kaso ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Samantala, sa puntong ito ng ating balitaan, tungo tayo sa Baluarte o yung lugar mismo ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte dyan sa Davao City. Ano naman kaya ang mga kaganapan dyan? At yung reaksyon ho ng mga kababayan ho nating Davaoenyo dito sa pag-usad ng kaso. Nariyan si Bombo Bianca ko at live mula sa Bombo Radyo, Davao. Please come in.
Tahimik ngunit puno ng pananabik ang Davao City sa unang araw ng confirmation of laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court sa The Hague, Netherlands. Bombo Dennis, walang malalaking pagtitipon o kilos protesta, ngunit sa ating pakikipagpanayam sa ilang mga residente dito sa Davao, malinaw ang patuloy nilang suporta sa ating dating Presidente Duterte. Ngayon, nagsimula ang pagdinig mga pasado alas 9:30 ng umaga doon mismo sa The Hague, Netherlands. Katumbang ito sa alas 4:30 ng hapon dito mismo sa Pilipinas at inaasahang tatagal hanggang Pebrero 27 nitong kasalukuyang taon. Layun itong naalamin kung may sapat ba na ebidensya kung itutuloy ba ang formal na paglilitis ang kasong may kaugnayan sa umano'y crimes against humanity kaugnay ng war on drugs ng kanyang administrasyon. Hindi pa ito ang mismong trial, kundi pagbusisi kung dapat bang umusad ang kaso sa full trial. Halos isang taon din, Bombo Dennis, na mula dalhin si FPRRD sa The Hague noong Marso 11, tuig 2025 para sa ilang Davaoenyo na natiling matatag ang kanilang paniniwala at pambabawalang sala siya at iba ay nagsasabing hindi nila nakakalimutan ang mga pagbabagong kanilang nakasod noong siya pa ang alkalde dito sa Davao City. Mula sa kampanya kontra kriminalidad hanggang sa disiplina sa komunidad, mga bagay na ayon kanila ay nagbibigay ng identidad sa Davao bilang isang pinakamaayos na lungsod sa bansa. Samantala, naglabas ng opisyal ng pamahayag ang puwersa ng Pilipinong Pandagat Party List sa pamumuno ni Representative Harold Duterte sa tahasang nagpahayag ng suporta sa dating Pangulo sa ilalim ng linya PPP stands with TRRD. Sa kanilang pahayag, iginiit ng partido na ang kasalukuyang usapin ay hindi umano tungkol sa accountability o hustisya. Ito'y kundi isang malinaw na isang political tactic lamang. Binigyang diin din niya na pinamunuan ito ni Duterte ang bansa sa panahong laganap ang problema sa iligal na droga at naniniwala sila na politically convenient time ay ginawa siyang scapegoat sa mga malawak na suliranin ng bansa. Idinagdag pa ng partido na habang nagpapatuloy ang proseso sa ICC, patuloy silang umaasa at nanalangin na makakabalik si Duterte sa Pilipinas. Samantala, nanatiling tahimik ang pamilyang Duterte at wala pang inilabas na opisyal na pamahayag kaugnay sa unang araw ng padinig. Sinubukan din natin kunin ang pamahayag ng mga opisyal sa lokal na pamahalaan ng Davao City, subalit wala pa silang ibinigay na opisyal na komento hinggil sa usapin. Sa hanay ng mga Davaoenyo, Bombo Dennis, mga Pastor Nation, mga kabombo, kapansin-pansin ang dalawang mukha ng damdamin. Mga nga naninindigan sa kanilang suporta at paniniwalang walang sapat na ebidensya laban sa dating Pangulo at may ilan namang nanawagan na igalang ang proseso ng international na hukuman at hintayin ang magiging pasya batay sa ebidensya. Kaugnay nito, ating dinggin ang pamahayag ng isang supporter ni FPRRD na si Rowan isang Davaoenyo.
I am happy because yung verdict sa kanya is pabor sa kanya or there is a chance na baka mapauwi na siya. I am happy kung makakauwi si President, mas maigi, mas mabuti. So, ang Davao City is waiting sa pagbabalik ni President Rodrigo Duterte. I can tell na the best jud si PRRD. So since na experience na gyud namo ang kalinaw sa Davao, so I know PRRD is very strong and tough man. So we give him encouragement to be always tough. O pagsubok lang to, pero darating din ang araw, uuwi din si PRRD. Hindi maaaring hindi.
Yan ang pamahayag ng isang Dabawen nga na si Divina Nasilia. Sa kabila ng katahimikan ng lungsod, malinaw na ang isyo ay may malalim na epekto sa damdamin ng mga residente. Ang magiging desisyon ng confirmation of charges ang magtatakda kung uusad ba ang kaso sa full trial. Isang hakbang na maaaring magmarka hindi lamang sa kapalaran ng dating Pangulo, kundi sa kasaysayan ng politika sa Pilipinas. Bombo Dennis, how's that?
Kumusta na lamang kami, Bombo Bianca, no? Meron bang, kanina nabanggit mo, may mga naglalabas ng reaction pero wala naman mga major sites na talagang pinagdarausan ng mga events. How about yung pamilya Duterte? Meron bang pagkakataon na humarap sila ngayon dyan sa mga supporters for this reason?
Actually, Bombo Dennis, kasalukuyang hinihintay pa natin ang opisyal na pamahayag ng pamilyang Duterte. Pero hingil dito, Bombo Dennis, no? Tanging parte lang sa pamilyang Duterte ay nagbigay ng pamahayag ay si Representative Harold Duterte mismo na nagpapangulo sa PPP Party List, kumbaga sa Pilipinong Pandagat Party List, Bombo Dennis.
Okay, sige. With that, maraming salamat, Bombo Bianca. Ingat kayo dyan.
Report mula dito sa impilan ng Bombo Radyo Davao. Ito si Bombo Bianca po and this Bombo Radyo Philippines. The number one in most trusted source of news information. Basta Radyo, Bombo!
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, napakinggan ho natin ang update mula mismo doon sa lugar ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. At this point in time, mga kabombo, kapiling naman natin sa ating linya ng komunikasyon ang isa ho sa mga nagsulong ng petisyon para doon sa kahilingan sa Korte Suprema, writ of habeas corpus para dito kay former President Rodrigo Duterte. So makiki-update tayo mga kabombo hinggil ho sa naturang hakbang. Nasa linya ng ating komunikasyon si Attorney Salvador Paulo Panelo Jr. Welcome sa Bombo Radio Philippines. We're nationwide and worldwide. Si Bombo Dennis Jamito po ito. At magandang hapon po sa inyo.
Dennis, at sa mga tagapakinig at tagapanood ng Bombo Radio.
Bilang abogado ho na naghain ng ilang petisyon ukol dito sa kaso o dito sa sitwasyon ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, makikikumusta lamang ho kami doon sa status ng naturang inyong petisyon, o ito ho ba ay may initial resolution na o pending pa rin sa kataas-taasang hukuman?
Walang update sa ngayon. Ang pinakahuling nangyari dyan sa kaso ay require ng Supreme Court, ng Korte Suprema natin na magsumite ng mga memorandum yung mga partido dito sa petition for habeas corpus. So yan po yung mga petitioner, kasama na po yung kliyente naming si Kitty Duterte at si Mayor Baste at saka si Congressman Polong. Tapos hiningan din syempre ng panig nila yung gobyerno na inaabagaduhan naman ng Office of the Solicitor General. So mula noon, mga noong end December and early January, mula noon wala pang movement yung kaso. Pero yung memorandum kasi na yun, Dennis, nangangahulugan na yun na yung huling pleading or filing na hihingi ng Supreme Court bago magdesisyon ito. Typically sa isang kaso, ang memorandum yung huling hinihingi ng korte. So umaasa tayo na any moment pwede nang magdesisyon ng Korte Suprema.
Kung sakali ho na madesisyonan na harinawa ay mailabas na nga yung pasya para sa ikalilinaw ng usapin, ano, kung sakali ho na madesisyonan ng kataas-taasang hukuman ang petisyon po na yan, paano ho kaya ang nakikita ninyong paraan para ma-impose o kaya maipatupad ng Philippine Court yung usapin, knowing na nandun na ho sa International Criminal Court ang ating dating Pangulo na si Rodrigo Duterte?
Dennis, ang posisyon namin dyan mula sa simula ay problema yan ng ehekutibo ng gobyerno natin kung paano nila mapapauwi si Pangulong Duterte na habang nakakulong na sa ICC. Ang posisyon namin, dahil silang may kagagawan yan, silang gumawa ng problema na yan, sila din ang dapat humanap ng solusyon para mapabalik siya. Pero kung ako ang tatanungin nyo, ang nakikita kong mga paraan kung paano mapabalik ay ang pinaka madali dyan ay makilahok ang Philippine government sa ICC at sabihin sa ICC na meron kaming kakayahan na litisin si Pangulong Duterte dito sa Pilipinas. Kaya ayon na rin mismo sa Rome Statute na nagsasabing meron lang jurisdiction ang ICC kapag ang isang bansa na miyembro nito or dating miyembro nito ay walang kakayanan or ayaw litisin ang isang taong na akusahan ng krimen na sakop ng Rome Statute, ay walang jurisdiction ng ICC. So yun ang pinakamadali na ang Pilipinas mismo makilahok at sabihin sa ICC na dito na lang namin lilitisin si Pangulong Duterte.
Bilang abogado ho ng mga anak ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, hanggang ano ho yung mga saklaw ho ninyo ng mga kaso maliban dito sa inihain po ninyong petisyon dyan sa kataas-taasang hukuman, if there is any?
Sa kasalukuyan, yun lang po. Yun lang pong petition for habeas corpus ang hinahawakan namin para sa Duterte family.
Okay. Ito ho nga iba pang mga personalidad ho na sumusuporta sa pamilya Duterte ay may mga aktibidad this coming February 25, ano, at parte ng kanilang sentimiento yung kalagayan ho ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Kayo ho ay makikibahagi din ba dito ho sa EDSA events, mga rally and other activities related to this, attorney?
Hindi pa tayo naiimbitahan dyan. Pero kung maimbitahan tayo tapos wala naman po tayong ibang kailangan gawin sa araw na yon, syempre susuportahan po natin yan.
Mensahe na lamang ho ninyo doon sa mga supporters ng former President Duterte dahil syempre iniiwasan din naman ho natin na magkaroon ng hindi magandang sitwasyon among themselves or yung iba pang mga grupo na naglalabas din ng kanilang sentimiento, nagiging emotional kasi yung iba sa mga kababayan ho natin. Please go ahead po, attorney.
Dennis, hindi naman may iwasan yan dahil sa nangyari kay Pangulong Duterte, yung pagkaroon ng samaang loob ang mga kababayan natin dahil sa ginawa nila kay Pangulong Duterte. Pero so far naman nakikita naman natin na payapa ang mga pagtitipon para suportahan ang dating Pangulo, pati na rin si VP Sara. So ang mensahe ko lang, mensahe lang ng pasasalamat. Malaking bagay ang suporta nyo sa pamilya Duterte. Sa amin na rin mga abogado na nagtataguyod ng mga karapatan ng ni Pangulong Duterte at ng pamilya. So marami pong salamat at tuloy-tuloy lang po tayong magpakita ng sentimiento natin at bantayan natin ng maigi ang mga susunod pang mangyayari. At syempre, dahil ang taong bayan naman po talaga ang may kapangyarihan na magbago ng gobyerno natin at ang mga palituntunin, 'di ba? So bantayan po natin yung mga mangyayari, tapos sa 2028 ilabas po natin yung sentimiento natin sa balota.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Panelo, sa pagtugon sa aming mga katanungan sa mga oras po na ito. Thank you so much.
Maraming salamat din, Dennis.
Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, nakausap po natin ang isa sa mga abogado ng pamilya Duterte, si Attorney Pablo Panelo Jr. Salvador Pablo Panelo Jr. Anak ko ito ni former Presidential Legal Counsel na si Attorney Sal Panelo, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. Siya ho ang ating nakadaupang palad sa impapawid sa mga sandaling ito. And of course, bibigyan din ho natin ang pagkakataon mamaya yung doon naman sa kabilang side, yung panig naman ng mga kampo nitong mga biktima ng umano'y extrajudicial killings, and of course yung iba pang mga grupo na makakausap din ho natin maya-maya lamang sa patuloy nating coverage dito sa Bombo Radio Philippines. At this point, ito naman, isa hong dating appointee ni former President Rodrigo Duterte from Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission, si former Undersecretary Attorney Manuelito Luna. Magandang araw po sa inyo. Si Bombo Dennis Jamito po ito. And live po tayo sa Bombo Radio Philippines at tinutugay-gaya natin itong mga kaganapan ukol sa kinakaharap na usapin ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. Unang-una, ano po ang inaasahan ninyo dito sa magiging pag-usad mamaya ng confirmation of charges laban kay former President Duterte, lalo't nag-wave ho siya ng kanyang pagharap dito ho sa mga bahagi ng chamber na siya hong kikilatis doon sa kanyang kasong kinakaharap, Attorney Luna.
Well, karapatan po ng isang akusado, sinabi na niya na hindi niya kinikilala ang jurisdiction ng ICC at hindi siya mag-participate sa proceeding na gaganapin yung confirmation of charges. Actually, confirmation of charges pa lang yan din. So, klaro yan, sinabi ng dating Pangulo. And to me, that is really proper, considering na kine-question ng dating Pangulo at ng pamilya niya, and even by us, his supporters, yung pagkadala sa kanya sa ICC. We have advanced the view that it was an extrajudicial rendition or state-sponsored kidnapping and expulsion in violation of our Constitution and the revised penal code. So tama lang na ang dating Pangulo ay hindi magpa-participate diyan sa proceeding na yan at patuloy ang kanyang pag-question sa jurisdiction ng International Criminal Court. Mas mabuti kung dito sa Pilipinas i-try yung mga kaso kung meron man laban kay dating Pangulong Duterte. Because that's a derogation of our sovereignty. Kung binibigay natin sa isang international court yung paglilitis or pagpapanagot sa isang citizen of the Philippines, bakit hindi dito? When all the complainants are Filipinos and they are here and our court processes and judicial processes and system are working. So, yan din ang isang question na nire-raise ko and the others. Bakit iso-surrender natin yung ating soberenya sa isang international criminal court na wala ng jurisdiction sa Pilipinas?
Okay, eto naman ho, may lumabas ho kamakailan na listahan ng mga pangalan na pati itong si Senator Bongo, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa at former Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre kalagkad na ho doon sa umano'y pagiging co-perpetrators nila dito sa kasong kinakaharap ni former President Duterte sa International Criminal Court. Ano ho ang inyong reaksyon sa bagay na ito?
From the legal point of view, wala akong nakikitang basehan kung bakit sinama sila. Other than para siguro pahiyain sila or iharas sila. Because for example, yung Justice Secretary before, si Attorney Aguirre, Secretary Aguirre, anong involvement niya dito sa drug war, no? So malabo, no? If you look at it, medyo malabo. In the case of dating PNP chief Senator Bato de la Rosa, meron pang konting link, no? Because siyempre enforcer siya. Pero kay Senator Bongo malabo rin kasi Senator Bongo at that time was the special assistant to the president. Anong kinalaman ni Senator Bongo sa law enforcement operations na in collective terms tatawagin nating drug war? So medyo malabo para sa amin ang announcement na ito. And besides, this did not come from the ICC. So duda ako kung totoo ito. Probably allegations lang yan ni Trillanes and the others na gusto nilang isama yung ibang mga personality. Pero sa tingin ko, parang premature really to comment on this at this time kasi wala namang announcement ng ICC kung merong warrant or merong action sila dito. So this is just, to me, this is just a diversion from the issues facing the administration, lalong-lalo na yung corruption. So, wala akong nakikitang value at this point ito sa atin other than to harass Senator Bongo, Senator Bato de la Rosa, and my good friend, former DOJ Secretary, Italiano.
Okay. Ano naman ho yung inyong masasabi tungkol dun sa mga, iba't iba reaction, ano? Minsan talagang galit na galit yung ilan ho sa mga supporters. Baka ho mauwi ito sa, kumbaga, yung magkakaroon ng tensyon, yung pagitan ho ng mga pro at anti-Duterte. Pero ang magiging pasya naman talaga ay nandun sa International Criminal Court. So, siguro mensahe po ninyo dun sa mga supporters and siguro non-supporters na rin ng former president. Go ahead po, Attorney Luna.
As always, we have voiced out our objections, our opposition to his continued detention in the International Criminal Court at The Hague in Netherlands. I've been to Netherlands myself many years ago. At it's a foreign land, napakalamig ng lugar na yan. And for a Filipino like President Duterte at age 80 or 81, hindi dapat nandun siya So, I've always prayed na ibalik siya dito sa Pilipinas at i-dismiss na yung mga charges na yan. Nagawa-gawa lang naman ng mga leftists at ng iilan. And I don't believe that these charges are true because if you look at the charges, yung kanilang summation clearly states na iilan lang ang murders, alleged murders na na-commit. Tapos hindi naman constituting attack upon a civilian population. So wala sa kategorya ng crime against humanity yung charges laban kay dating Presidente Duterte. At kawawa yung mama because he has served our country, he has done his best, and then at age 80 or 81, pinadala siya ng ating gobyerno ng gobyerno Marcos Jr. sa ICC para harapin ang isang kaso na pwede namang elitist dito sa Pilipinas. So yun ang amin. And we will express this through some activities, mga assembleya, mga Facebook posts, interviews. And by the way, sa March 11, napagkasunduan ng Philippine Alliance for National Accountability or PANA, na miyembro po ang aming organisasyon at ng Kampilan, na i-commemorate natin ang 1 year na pagkadetene at pagka-expel kay dating President Rodrigo Duterte sa ICC The Hague, Netherlands. So, isang major activity po namin ito para ipakita sa ating bansa at sa ating mga kababayan na yung aming loob ay hindi affected by some developments in the case. We continue to support and we are strongly supporting the President, Rodrigo Duterte, former President of the Philippines, sa kanyang pakikipaglaban dito sa harassment na ginawa sa kanya, even as he is facing some personal struggles because alam mo, ay sakit ng ating dating Pangulo and he has already served our country. Bakit naman ginaganito natin ang isang Pilipino na pwede naman litisin dito sa Pilipinas? So sa March 11, we will commemorate itong sad part of our history, yung pag-expel at kidnap kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa ICC. We are composed of UPI, nandyan yung United People's Initiative, nandyan yung Kampilan, and many other organizations. May mga Bangsamoro groups sa amin. Meron din yung mga recently joined na mga grupo like Maisog. Kasama namin sila and the others. So yung grupo ng ni Attorney Ferdy Topacio, kasama namin, myself, and the others, andyan kami lahat sa PANA, Philippine Alliance for National Accountability, which is headed by multi-sectoral organizations. Wala kami talagang leader yan because all of us are council members at saka ang dami naming organization. This is the biggest umbrella organization in the Philippines so far.
Okay, nabanggit ho ninyo yung Bangsamoro, no? May makukuha din po tayong pag-uulat mula dyan sa ating himpilan. So standby ang Star FM Cotabato dyan sa mga update maya-maya lamang. So proceed tayo dito sa ating interview, Attorney Luna, no? Kayo ba ay may mga gagawin ding kilos protesta o ang inyong grupo para dito ho sa nalalapit na anibersaryo ng EDSA People Power at sabi kasi parang may mga pagkilos and yung iba may mga sentimiento, may mga existing na sentimiento na gustong mailahad. So ito yung sasamantalain ng ilang grupo para ho makapag-voice out ng kanilang saloobin. How about ito hong mga nabanggit po ninyong grupo?
Yeah, if you recall, noong January 31, nagkaroon kami ng motorcade, no? And it was a successful one. So, ulitin namin yon sa February 25. There will be a part 2, so to speak. At ito po ay pangungunahan ng Kampilan. Kampilan is an alliance of about 17 organizations. Ang head namin dyan ay si dating Congressman Jing Paras. So, I have some organizations which are members of the alliance. So lahat kami, ang aming decision ay to commemorate the anniversary, kasali kami sa isang caravan. So this is not really the rally na gaganapin doon sa EDSA sa February 25, but this will be a parallel activity in commemoration of the anniversary of People Power.
Okay. Pero ito, Attorney Luna, no? Hindi ba kayo nababahala? Baka may sumigaw dyan ng Marcos resign or mga related na mga panawagan at humantong dun sa kasong sedisyon o yung inciting to sedition or related charges na pwede hong ipukul laban ho sa inyo?
Kaming isang miyembro na nakasuhan, no? Pero hindi related to any of these activities. But rather doon sa blog niya, I'm referring to Eric Celis, yung vlogger na si Eric Celis. So may mga pinayal na kaso ang CIDG na yata sa kanya. Although we protest this, pero na-file nila. Ang iba is still under investigation yata. So, pero ito walang kinalaman doon sa aming mga activities. Because even yung motorcade na ginawa noong January 30, hindi kami hinarang ng MMDA, ng TNT because we sought also coordination with the PNP at inabisuhan namin sila. And we were very peaceful naman sa aming activity. Walang untoward incident happen, and then wala ring disruption sa traffic flow. So wala akong nakikitang masama. If we express also dito sa February 25 yung aming panawagan. In fact, there has been a growing call for the resignation of President Marcos Jr. So wala tayong nakikita. And besides, this is free speech protected by the Constitution. At in this particular case, this is freedom of expression on our part. And I know that the authorities will respect yung aming aktibidad.
Okay. Maihabol ko na lamang po ito, Attorney, bago po namin kayo pakawalan. Kunan na lang po namin kayo ng reaksyon about dun sa deklarasyon ho ni Vice President Sara Duterte na siya ay tatakbo bilang Pangulo ng ating bansa sa darating na 2028 elections. Ano ho ang inyong reaksyon dito? Alam ko, kayo man ay malapit din sa pangalawang Pangulo. So, reaksyon lang po, Attorney Luna.
Well, may mga meron kaming na monitor na mga kritiko na salita, pero hindi naman napag-atake, more of opinion nila at saka tempered naman. Kasi karapatan naman ng any individual, in this particular case, Vice President Sara Duterte, na magpahayag ng kanyang desisyon. And we were very happy dito sa announcement niya na finally she brought it to the attention of the public that she is interested and she will be running sa 2028. So magandang senyales ito. This is good for our democracy, and this only proves that yung ating demokrasya, kahit na tayo na sa isang political crisis and even economic crisis, ay vibrant, and yung ating demokrasya is still, although bata pa talaga ang ating demokrasya compared to other democracies, but we are showing to the world na tayo ay nag-i-evolve into a mature democracy, at magandang bagay yan. Magandang balita yan for the country in general.
Okay, with that, maraming salamat po, Attorney Luna, former Undersecretary ng Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission. Magandang hapon po sa inyo. Mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, nakausap po natin si Attorney Manuelito Luna. Dati ho siyang Undersecretary ng Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission during Duterte administration. Ito muna, nabanggit natin kanina mula dyan sa Bangsamoro Region. Makikibalita tayo kung ano naman yung mga reaksyon ng mga tao hudo kaugnay dito sa confirmation of charges hearing sa kaso ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Nasa linya ang Star FM Cotabato.
Iisa ang naging pulso ng ilang residente sa Cotabato City kaugnay sa isinasagawang confirmation of charges ng International Criminal Court laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte na kasalukuyang nakapiit sa The Hague, Netherlands. Sa naging pag-iikot ng Star FM Cotabato News Team, sinabi ng ilang mamamayan na sa ilalim ng administrasyon ng dating Pangulo ay kanilang naranasan ng mas pinaigting na kampanya kontra kriminalidad at iligal na droga. Ilan sa mga mag-aaral sa lungsod ang nagpahayag na noon ay mas maluwag umano silang nakagagalaw sa gabi dahil sa pakiramdam nila ay mas mahigpit ang pagbabantay laban sa krimen.
Para po sa amin yung last na pamamalakad niya po, parang nagka-benefit po kaming mga kabataan din po.
That time kasi is yung time niya is na yung mga krimen sa bansa natin is nalilesen ba.
Yung sa gabi, yung lahat ng addict po natakot sa kay Digong. Tapos kahit maglakad ka sa tuwing gabi, mafe-feel mo na safe ka kasi parang takot na gud sila mga.
Ayon naman kay Sherilyn Oliver, isang tindera sa lungsod, malaking bagay umano sa kanilang hanap buhay ang naging kampanya kontra droga dahil naging maingat at umiiwas sa gulo ang ilang sangkot sa iligal na gawain.
Nung siya pa ang Pangulo, safe din ang Pilipinas, lalo na sa mga addict, especially sa aming mga tindera na kahit madaling araw na kaming bukas pa, safe pa rin. Sana hindi matuloy yung mga charges na binibintang kay dating Pangulong Duterte.
Mayroon ding ilang residente na nagsabing nakapagdulot umano ng takot sa mga masasamang loob ang mga ipinatupad na polisiya ng nakaraang administrasyon kaya nabawasan ang karahasan sa kanilang lugar.
Sa panahon niya, daming natatakot. Tsaka pag lumabas ka ng gabi, safe na safe yung mga tao. Tsaka yung mga dating mga gagawa ng mga iba, natatakot. Kesa ngayon, parang wala na, lantaran na lang eh.
Gayunman, nananatiling nakabinbin ang proseso sa ICC habang hinihintay ang magiging desisyon ng mga hukom kaugnay sa kumpirmasyon ng mga kasong isinampa laban sa dating Pangulo. At yan ang aking report mula dito sa himpilan ng 93.7 Star FM Cotabato. Ako, si Bombo Olis, and this is Bombo Radyo Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radyo, Bombo!
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, anumang sandali mula ho ngayon ay papasok natin yung mga kaganapan dun mismo sa The Hague kaugnay ng confirmation of charges hearing kay former President Rodrigo Duterte. At eto, mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, ating tunghayan direkta mula sa The Hague.
Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Mga kabombo, nakita natin yung mga abogado ni former President Rodrigo Duterte sa unang bahagi. Ito, pakinggan na ho natin ang proceedings.
Madam Courtroom Officer, could you please call the case?
Good morning, Madam President, Your Honors. Situation in the Republic of the Philippines in the case of the prosecutor versus Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Case reference ICC 0121-0125, and for the record, we are in open session.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I am now going to ask the parties and participants to introduce themselves. Starting by Mr. Deputy Prosecutor. Could I please ask you to introduce yourself and to confirm to me whether the list of your team members that I received before the hearing is correct? Thank you, Madam President. Your Honours. The Office of the Prosecutor is represented today by myself, I'm Niai, Deputy Prosecutor. By my side, I have James Mirity, Case Manager. I have Mr. Julian Nichols, Senior Trial Lawyer. And behind us, we have Mr. Edward Jeremy, Trial Lawyer, Madam Robin Croft, Trial Lawyer, Madam Maria Berdenikova, Trial Lawyer, and lastly, Hannah Allen, Associate Trial Lawyer. These are the individuals comprising our team today, and I thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor. Now, before moving on to the defence, I note that Mr. Duterte is not present in the courtroom today. Indeed, on the 20th of February 2026, the Chamber granted Mr. Duterte's request to waive his rights to be present at the confirmation of charges hearing. Pursuant to Article 61(2)(a) of the Rome Statute, and Rule 124 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence. In this decision, number 387, the Chamber concluded that the conditions contained in the provisions were fulfilled, namely that Mr. Duterte has the right and knows he has the right to be present at the confirmation of charges hearing, and knows the consequences of waiving this right. However, Mr. Duterte's counsel is present today to represent him. Counsel, could you please introduce yourself and confirm to me that the list of your team members that I received before the hearing is indeed correct.
Good morning, Madam President. Good morning, Your Honours. Indeed, the list before you is correct. May I introduce my team? To my left, I have Dr. Dov Jacobs. To my right, I have Ms. Havnit Sethi. Sitting next to her is Maître Alexandre Dezev-Dabi. Behind him, Attorney David Rancati. Sitting next to him, Maître Sandrine de Sena. And our two further lawyers, we have Nicolas Rousseau and also Kaylin Chen. And if Your Honour will permit me, there are also Filipino attorneys who are attending and supporting us today, and I'll briefly mention their names. Maître Salvador Mediadea, who Your Honours are familiar with from the initial appearance. Attorney Martin Delgra, Attorney Silvestre Bello, Attorney Alfredo Lim, Attorney César Doulay, and of course, Attorney Salvador Panello. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, maître. J'ai envie de...
Thank you very much, Counsel. I would like to now call upon the legal representatives of victims to introduce themselves and confirm to me that the list of your team members I received before is correct.
Proceedings are represented today by Mr. Joel Butuyan, Mr. Gilbert Andres, myself, Paulina Masida, and I confirm the list of our jurists who assist us today as provided to the court officer. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, maître.
Thank you very much, Maître Masida. Thank you. On my right, I have Judge Rain Adelaide. And I have Judge Adelaide Sophie Alapina Gansu, and to my right I have Maria del Socorro Flores Liera. And I am Julia Antonuela Motok, and I am the presiding judge in pretrial chamber 1 of the court. This hearing concerns the confirmation of charges by the prosecution against Mr. Duterte. At this stage of pretrial proceedings, the OTP alleges that Mr. Duterte is responsible for the crimes that the court officer shall read out shortly. The Chamber shall not take any decision with regard to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Duterte during this hearing. Indeed, the role of the Chamber is to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to establish substantial grounds to believe that Mr. Duterte committed the crimes with which he is charged. If all or part of the charges are confirmed, the Chamber will refer the case to trial, where the trial chamber will decide upon the innocence or guilt of Mr. Duterte. The general principles to be applied at the hearing are as follows. The suspect, in accordance with Article 66 of the Rome Statute, the suspect is considered to be innocent until his guilt has been proven by the court. The burden of proof is upon the OTP, which must produce sufficient evidence to prove the charges against Mr. Duterte at the required standard of proof, at Article 61, paragraph 7 of the Rome Statute. Finally, the defense enjoys, or the suspect enjoys, all the rights listed at Article 61, paragraphs 6 and 67 of the Rome Statute. The hearing shall take place according to the schedule contained in the order dated the 26th of January 2026, document number 359. The parties and participants must respect the allocated speaking times indicated in this order. I would like to remind the parties and participants that oral remarks must be concise and that repetition of previously presented arguments should be avoided. In addition, in order to facilitate the work of the interpreters and ensure the proper transcription of discussions, please make sure that your microphone is on every time you address the court. And please speak slowly and mark pauses between each sentence. Generally speaking, the hearing will be held in open session, and parties and participants will refrain from mentioning the names of victims and witnesses. They will only refer to them by their pseudonym or their code. In order to avoid the disclosure of any confidential information, notably with regard to witnesses and victims, the parties and participants will clearly indicate whether their submissions can be presented in public or whether they deem it necessary to move into private session, notably when referring to items of evidence. The parties and participants will clearly indicate when it is no longer necessary to remain in private session. With these rules in place, we can now move to the reading of the charges in its shortened form, indicating the charges against Mr. Duterte. The full version is available publicly on the internet site of the court. The defense has not raised any objections in this regard. I would like to remind the public that the charges that shall be read out in a few seconds comprise allegations raised by the Office of the Prosecutor that the Chamber shall analyze in order to decide whether the evidence presented by the Office of the Prosecutor is sufficient in order for these charges to be confirmed. Madam Courtroom Officer, would you please read the charges?
The prosecution charges Mr. Rodrigo Roa Duterte with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of murder and attempted murder as a crimes against humanity committed between 2013 and around June 2016 and between around July 2016 and September 2018 in the Republic of the Philippines as follows. Count 1. Murder of 19 victims alleged to be criminals, including 3 children, who were killed in or around Davao City in the Philippines between 2013 and around 2016 by members of the Davao Death Squad, while Mr. Duterte was the mayor of the Davao City pursuant to Article 71A of the Rome Statute. Count 2. Murder of 14 victims labeled as high-value targets for their alleged criminality, who were killed in locations across the Philippines between around July 2016 and July 2017 by a network of perpetrators comprising state actors and others, referred to as the National Network, while Mr. Duterte was the President of the Philippines pursuant to Article 71A of the Rome Statute. And count 3. Murder and attempted murder of 45 victims, comprising 43 murders and 2 attempted murders of persons alleged to be criminals, including 3 children, who were targeted in barangay clearance operations in locations across the Philippines between around July 2016 and September 2018 by members of the national network, while Mr. Duterte was the President of the Philippines pursuant to Articles 71A and 25(3)(f in respect of the attempted murder of the Rome Statute. The prosecution alleges that Mr. Duterte is individually criminally responsible for all three of the above counts as follows. First, as an indirect co-perpetrator pursuant to Article 25(3)(a of the Rome Statute. At least between 1st November 2011 and 16 March 2019, Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators shared a common plan to neutralize alleged criminals in the Philippines, including individuals perceived or alleged to be associated with drug use, sale, or production, through violent crimes including murder. Mr. Duterte and his co-perpetrators implemented this common plan through the hierarchically organized structures of the Davao City Police and Davao Death Squad, and then the national network. Within the framework of the common plan, Mr. Duterte made essential contributions to the crimes in counts 1 to 3 by A. Designing and disseminating the police to neutralize alleged criminals, both in his role as a mayor of the Davao City and also during his presidential campaign and as a president, including by endorsing the anti-illegal drugs campaign Double Barrel. B. Establishing and overseeing the DDS. C. Instructing and authorizing violent acts, including murder, to be committed against alleged criminals, including alleged drug dealers and users. D. Providing personnel and other necessary logistic resources such as weapons, including those to be used in the execution of the crimes. E. Appointing key personnel to positions which were crucial to the execution of the crimes. F. Offering financial incentives and promotions to police officers and hitmen to kill alleged criminals. G. Creating and maintaining a system in which perpetrators knew they would be protected, including through promises of immunity and shielding perpetrators from investigation and prosecutions. H. Making public statements authorizing, condoning, and encouraging killings of alleged criminals, both as a mayor of the Davao City and as a president of the Philippines. I. Authorizing state actors to take part in the anti-drugs campaign and temporarily revoking such authorization, including to placate public outcry. J. Publicly naming individuals and holding up charts from lists of alleged criminals, including so-called high-value targets, some of whom were subsequently killed. Second, in the alternative, Mr. Duterte is charged with ordering and/or inducing the charged crimes pursuant to Article 25(3)(b of the Rome Statute and/or aiding and abetting these crimes pursuant to Article 25(3)(c of the Rome Statute.
Merci, Madame la Greffière.
Thank you, Madam Courtroom Officer. With regard to objections and observations under Rule 122, Paragraph 3 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the Chamber notes that the defense submitted a number of written observations, and the last of which was on the 16th of February 2026, to which the OTP and the legal representatives of victims responded, respectively, on the 17th and the 18th of February 2026. On the 20th of February 2026, the Chamber dismissed, in its public decision, the defence's objections, in specifying that the defense and the Office of the Prosecutor are not permitted to reiterate the same arguments already presented in the filings mentioned, that they filed to date in this case. I will now ask if the parties wish to make any oral submissions on this point before moving to the opening statements. Mr. Deputy Prosecutor? Mr. Nyang, we do not have any submissions to make in this regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor. Counsel?
Merci beaucoup, Maître Kaufmann. Donc, on peut maintenant passer à la phase.
So we can now move on to stage 2, namely the opening statements, and I hand over to the Office of the Prosecutor. Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, please.
Madam President, honorable member of the bench, all those following these proceedings inside the courtroom and outside, and especially those in the Philippines. Today marks an important day for international justice for the people of the Philippines, for the victims, and for this court. The commencement of the confirmation hearing against Mr. Rodrigo Duterte is a reminder of the court's unwavering commitment to its mission to investigate and prosecute individuals for the most serious crimes of concern to the international community and to bring justice to the thousands of victims of the mass crimes and atrocities perpetrated in the Philippines. It is also a reminder that those in power are not above the law. Your Honors, over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I will provide an overview of the evidence in this case that demonstrates that Mr. Duterte is responsible for the charged crimes. And my team will then develop aspects of this evidence in more details. This case before you today, it is before you today because there are substantial ground to believe that Mr. Duterte is criminally responsible for those 3 counts of murder just spelled out and attempted murder as crimes against humanity. These charged crimes were committed during the time within the court jurisdiction, which is between the 1st of November 2011 and the 16th of March 2019. At first, they were committed in and around Davao City, where Mr. Duterte was a mayor, and then expanded across the rest of the Philippines when he became president. Mr. Duterte is charged with 49 incidents of murder and attempted murder of 78 victims, including children. These murders and attempted murders were part of a widespread and systematic attack that overall resulted in the killings of thousands of civilians across the country during the relevant time frame. Thus, the charged incidents are merely a fraction of the overall criminality that resulted from Mr. Duterte's so-called war on drugs. What is Mr. Duterte's core contribution? Your Honors, Mr. Duterte played a pivotal role in the commission of the charged crimes. His contribution was essential, as he was at the very heart of the common plan to use his words, to neutralize alleged criminals in the Philippines, including through murders. The victim included individuals associated with or perceived to be associated with drugs. One of the first things Mr. Duterte did when he became the mayor of Davao back in 1988 was to create the infamous Davao Death Squad, otherwise known as DDS. As you will have seen from the prosecution pre-confirmation brief, Mr. Duterte personally instructed Death Squad members that their mission was to kill criminals and suspected criminals, including drug users and dealers, also referred to as drug pushers. The death squads carried out this mission well into the charge period through 2011 to 2016, perpetrating the crimes charged in count 1. Your Honors, Mr. Duterte's criminal plan and his intent were no secret. He not only shared them with his co-perpetrators and members of the death squad, but also made them abundantly clear to the general public in the numerous public statements that he made time and again. During his presidential campaign, Mr. Duterte explicitly vowed to implement the common plan to neutralize alleged criminal nationwide if elected. This was his program to be elected. He publicly announced his intention to eradicate corruption, criminality, and drugs in 3 to 6 months. And this is what he said. I quote, "If I become the president, I will order the military and the police to hunt down the drug lords, the big ones, and kill them." That's what he said. And this can be found at tab 12 of the prosecution list of material. Similarly, when speaking about druggies, I quote, in a televised interview in 2015, this is again what he said. "If I become president, you will all get wiped out. I will order your execution within 24 hours. That's what he said. That I quote directly from his word. And this quote can be found at tab 19.2 of the prosecution list of materials, ERN PHL OTP 401684, page 003, and these are the lines 82 to 83. And elected he was. And becoming president on 13th of June 2016, this provided him with the opportunity to follow through with his promise and to expand extrajudicial killings of alleged criminals beyond Davao and across the rest of the Philippines. He did this through the implementation of the National Anti-Illegal Drug Campaign, better known as Duterte's War on Drug, and its project, Double Barrel. These were carried out by the national network consisting of law enforcement personnel working together with non-police assets and hitmen. Mr. Duterte authorized murder and personally selected some of the targets. During the mayoral period, when he was mayor, his clearance was required for the DDS to carry out the killings. Essentially, members of the DDS needed Mr. Duterte's green light to murder. And during the presidential period, Mr. Duterte has continued to personally identify some of the targets, including by publicly naming those he claimed were involved in illegal drug trade or in other forms of criminality. He also identified targets by holding up a list containing their name. And if you are on the list, you will be killed. And this was a word of one prosecution witness. And this evidence can be found at tab 54 of the prosecution list of materials, ERN PHL OTP 00015-486, page 0009, and the relevant lines are 260 to 261. Mr. Duterte provided moral and financial support to the direct perpetrators as well. In a 12 December 2016 speech, Mr. Duterte admitted that he used to ride around Davao on a motorcycle looking for trouble, so he could kill. And he said, and this again his own word I'm quoting here, in Davao, I used to do it personally, just to show the guy that if I can do it, why can't you? And these are his own words. And this quote can be found at tab 16.1 of the prosecution list of material, ERN PHL OTP 00015-547 at 0002 lines 7 and 8. And the evidence show that Mr. Duterte's Davao City Mayor office provided some member of the DDS with a regular salary. Financial rewards were also given to direct perpetrators in the form of cash per head of killing. And at a press conference in 2013, Mr. Duterte stated that shoot to kill orders and reward are, and I quote him, are legitimate tools of government to fight lawlessness. This is his own word. And if he surrendered to me or his carcass dead, then I double the price. And again, and that was what he boasted. This code can be found at tab 17.2 of the prosecution list of materials, PSL-OTP-000094932 at 0002, and the relevant lines are line 7 to 11. Deaths of drug personalities killed in anti-drug operation were endorsed by Mr. Duterte's administration and listed as official accomplishment in public reporting. Your Honors, as you will have a confirmation brief, Mr. Duterte also provided the direct perpetrators with weapons, ammunition, and logistical support to facilitate the commission of the charged crime. And he also had control, wide control over those crimes. And let me now turn specifically to that control. As mayor of Davao and later as president of the Philippines, Mr. Duterte wielded ultimate influence and authority over the physical perpetrators of the crimes. As mayor, Mr. Duterte was chief executive of the Davao city government, with responsibility for exercising general supervision and control over all its activities. He had formal operational supervision and control over National Police Unit in Davao. As creator and head of the DDS, he also had de facto control over the death squad's members. When Mr. Duterte became president on the 30th of June 2016, he sat at the very apex of the political power structure in the Philippines. He became the head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of all armed forces of the Philippines. He also became the leader of the country's police forces. This level of authority allowed him to wield de jure and de facto control over those implementing the common plan nationwide. Mr. Duterte's control over the crime is also apparent from his ability to interrupt their commission when he so chooses. And as outlined in our reconfirmation brief, he successfully suspended police anti-illegal drug operation on 2 occasions following public outcries in response to particularly notorious killings. On both occasions, the number of reported killings dropped significantly during the suspension, showcasing his control. So when he asks people to act, they act. When he asks them to refrain, they do so. So they oblige. So Mr. Duterte was well aware of the authority he had over the perpetrators. In a speech given to the National Bureau of Investigation in November 2016, he expressly acknowledged his position of power. And this is what he said. To the military, I am commander-in-chief. On the civilian side, I am the chief executive of the government. And when talking about the police, this is what he's saying. They are my subordinate, and I am ultimately responsible for their deeds. And these are quotations, and they can be found at tab 131.2 of our prosecution list of materials at ERN PSL-OTP-00095-679, page 0004, and the relevant lines are from 131 to 134. And the direct perpetrators complied with Duterte's order and respected his authority. Mr. Duterte was respected by the physical perpetrators. He was feared, and his order and instruction were obeyed. One insider witness explicitly says that the police killed, and I quote, because of the directive of the president. This is what the witness said, an insider. And this quote can be found at tab 120 of the prosecution list of material, ARN PSL OTP -000886631-R01 and page 66, and the relevant line are from 2304 to 2306. And this statement is corroborated by other statements we have also provided. And some direct perpetrator complied because of their blind loyalty to Mr. Duterte. Some did it out of fear, and others were encouraged to comply by promises of money and rewards. For some, killings reached the level of a perverse form of competition with effort to attain killing quotas, which in turn would lead to promotions and rewards. Others felt there was no other choice but to comply, with one insider explaining that it was simply not possible to not obey Mr. Duterte's command. And this is also from an insider witness. And this evidence can be found at tab 51 of the prosecution list of materials, ERN PSL-OTP-001-5403 at page 0008 to 0009, and the relevant line here is from 240 to 245. Direct perpetrators were further emboldened to commit crime by Mr. Duterte's repeated promises of immunity. In various public statements, Mr. Duterte vowed to protect the police involved in killing. And this is what he said again. For as long as there is a power to pardon in the Constitution, that's my weapon against crime. If you massacre 100 and there are 100 of you, then you will all be pardoned. Restore to full political and civil rights, plus a promotion to boot. It's like that, especially the high profile. And this quote can be found at tab 130.2 of the prosecution list of materials at ERN PSL-OTP and 50336 at page 0010. Such statements reassure the physical perpetrators. One insider described that he felt confident to continue killing people because he knew that he wouldn't be arrested for that. And this evidence can be found at tab 38 of the prosecution list of material, ERN PSL-OTP-0001-2779 at page 0005, and relevant lines are from 130 to 131. Your Honors, let me now say a few words about just the contextual elements. The 78 murders and attempted murders that Mr. Duterte is charged with in this case were not random. These were not random crimes. Nor was they spontaneous or happened in isolation. Rather, the evidence demonstrates that they were part of a widespread and systematic attack directed against the civilians population of the Philippines. The murders and attempted murders were carried out across the Philippines and over a substantial period of time. Overall, Duterte's so-called war on drugs resulted in the killings of thousands of civilians from the 1st of November 2011 to the 16th of March 2019. And many of these victims were...
Excuse me, Counsel, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Yes, that were children. The victim of extrajudicial killing charge in this case were brutally murdered, some after having been abducted and mistreated. Unlike Mr. Duterte, who is represented by his counsel here today, they were deprived of any form of due process. The loss of every single one of these victims had the most profound impact on their families, their friends, and ultimately their communities. Their suffering was met not merely with Mr. Duterte's indifference, but with his mocking. In a 25 July 2016 speech, he expressly made fun of the iconic photograph portraying the partner of an extrajudicial killing victim cradling his body, which now visible on our screen. While the specific incident portrayed in this photograph is not charged in this case, Mr. Duterte's comment on it is demonstrative of his attitude towards the victims. In reference to this photo, Mr. Duterte, this is what he said. Those of you who are still sober, those who haven't tried illegal drugs, if you don't want to die or get hurt, don't rely on the priest, including human rights advocate. They won't be able to prevent death. So, don't do it. And then there you are, sprawled on the ground, and you are portrayed in a broadsheet like Mother Mary cradling the dead cadaver of Jesus Christ. That's how they are creating dramas here. This is what he said. And this quote can be found at tab 128 of the prosecution list of material at ERN PSL-OTP-50335, page 0008. And of course, the question of whether Mr. Duterte had knowledge and intent, of course, it goes without saying. Your Honors, Mr. Duterte intended and knew that the charged crime were occurring, or that they would occur in the ordinary course of events that he had set in place and put in motion. His intent and knowledge are shown by the multiple statements he made throughout his mayoral and presidential tenure, promising to reduce crimes by killing alleged criminals, promoting the common plan, and urging police and even members of the public to kill alleged criminals. As detailed in the prosecution pre-confirmation brief, and as Your Honor will hear in the course of my team's presentation, Mr. Duterte also made statements directly acknowledging allegation of extrajudicial killings by his subordinates and issued written order showing he knew about the crimes they committed. Your Honors, the prosecution relies on significant and varied sources of evidence to demonstrate that substantial ground exists to believe that Mr. Duterte is criminally responsible for the crimes. This evidence includes multiple witness statements, including insider witnesses. It includes many speeches of Mr. Duterte himself, as well as the statement of his co-perpetrators. It also includes orders and other documents signed by himself. The prosecution further relies on official government documents, including material from the Philippine National Police. It relies on drug watch lists, on audio and video material, as well as on forensic and financial evidence. Your Honors, during the prosecution's subsequent presentation, my colleague will elaborate on some of these core evidence in more detail. Mr. Nichols will give a presentation on Mr. Duterte's background, followed by an overview of the evidence demonstrating his responsibility for the crime charged in count 1. This will be followed by the presentation of Mr. Jeremy behind me, who will speak about the evidence demonstrating Mr. Duterte's responsibility as president for the crime charged in count 2 entry. And Ms. Croft, on my left, will then elaborate on the contextual element of crime against humanity and the mode of liability through which Mr. Duterte is responsible for the crimes alleged in this case. And to conclude, Madam President, Your Honor, while this court cannot reunite victims with their loved one, it can help reveal the truth about what happened to them and bring a sense of justice to the victim. The charges before you today are serious, and the evidence submitted require their confirmation. And Mr. Duterte must be held to account, and this case should be confirmed for trial. I thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor. Now we are slightly in advance on our schedule. I will now hand over to the legal representative of victims for her opening statements until 11, and then after that you shall continue. Please proceed, ma'am.
Madam President, Your Honors, by way of an opening statement, we convey the views and concerns of the 497 victims authorized to participate in these proceedings. At the outset, Your Honors, we communicate the very deep disappointment of the victims at the decision allowing Rodrigo Duterte not to be present in this stage of confirmation of charges. The sight of Mr. Duterte being read and being confronted with the grave and horrible charges against him would have constituted a vital component of justice for the victims. This case symbolically represents the last boat that the victims can board to go on a journey in search of justice for their loved ones who were brutally killed upon the orders of Mr. Duterte. If this chamber prevents the boat from sailing by not confirming the charges, the victims will forever be moored in an island where the nights are filled with the screams and cries of their massacred loved ones. there is absolutely no other recourse for the victims. No less than former Philippine Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla admitted just a few months ago that the door to domestic justice is permanently closed for victims of the Duterte extrajudicial killings. Remulla declared, and we quote, "It is difficult to prove the case here and build up the case because those who need to speak are involved in the crime. There's nothing, not even a police report. You don't have a scene of the crime, you don't have ballistics, you don't have DNA." Remulla further declared, and I quote, "Everything that could be erased was erased so that the cases would not push through. That is why this has reached the ICC." Under the Philippine justice system, Your Honors, no criminal case can reach the courts unless they are initiated and filed by the Department of Justice or the Office of the Ombudsman. From Justice Secretary, Remulla has been appointed as Ombudsman. So the two gatekeepers of justice are successively occupied by a ranking official who has declared that there is absolutely no hope for domestic justice for the victims. If the charges are not confirmed in this case, one of the gravest concerns of the victims is that Mr. Duterte will return to the Philippines as a conquering hero. He will resume preaching his gospel of impunity. In fact, if Mr. Duterte could threaten to slap the judges of this court, which he did while he was president, this chamber should imagine the kind of terror-filled threats and the violent actions that can easily be used against the victims if the suspect walks free from this court. If the charges are not confirmed, it is a very serious concern of the victims that Mr. Duterte will be portrayed in history by his multitude of followers as the leader who vanquished the ICC and who cleansed his country of 30,000 rapists, murderers, and dangerous criminals, which were the scornful words he sweepingly used against all those who were killed in his murderous spree. Your Honors, Mr. Duterte has been in detention here in The Hague for almost a year now, but there has been no peace and rest for the victims. From the time their loved ones were killed and continuously up to this time, they lived in constant fear for their lives. The arrest and detention of Mr. Duterte has not stopped impunity in the Philippines. The virus of impunity that he spread all over the country has become a cancer that has metastasized, infecting millions of Filipinos. Mr. Duterte has created clones of himself. He converted millions of peace-loving citizens into bloodthirsty disciples who have become converts to the belief that violence and killings are valid solutions to societal problems. The killings masterminded by Mr. Duterte continue to have consequences for the victims even to this day because of his clones. These mini Dutertes harass, threaten, or commit outright violence against the victims and their families. As shown by the number of victims participating in this proceeding so far, many still fear to come out and tell their stories of how their lives became a living hell as a result of Mr. Duterte's crimes, and because they are constantly terrified of being targeted with violence by Duterte fanatics. Many victims have been hesitant to participate in this ICC case because they live in communities that thrive with Duterte clones. They see the halls of power of their country teeming with Duterte disciples. They see and hear senators, congresspersons, mayors, governors, and powerful public figures who are mini Dutertes. The daughter of Mr. Duterte is the vice president, and she has just recently declared that she is running for president in 2028. One Duterte son is a congressman. Another is the Davao City mayor, and his grandchildren occupy positions of power. The plague of impunity has spread not only among Filipinos in the Philippines, but even among expatriate Filipinos in faraway lands like here in The Hague. When we reported to the victims that we, their external legal representatives, feel like fugitives.
Apologies, Counsel, it's 11 o'clock.
When we reported to the victims that we, their external legal representatives, feel like fugitives who avoid our own countrymen here in The Hague,
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Council. We will now take a half-hour break as provided for in the schedule, and you shall resume your remarks at 11:30. These are the rules that are set in the schedule, which was set in paragraph 18 of the decision.
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, tuloy-tuloy pa rin tayo sa pagtutok dito ho sa mga kaganapan sa The Hague, sa bahagi ng Netherlands. At kani-kanina, napakinggan ho natin ang pagsasalita ng isa sa mga abogado para sa mga biktima ng umano'y extrajudicial killings sa katauhan ni Attorney Joel Butuyan. At itong mga kabombo ay pinapaliwanag niya yung laman ng kanilang reklamo laban kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Napakinggan din ho at napanood natin kanina ang mga personalidad na siyang nangangasiwa dito, partikular na itong si Presiding Judge Julia Antoniela Motok at maging ang iba pang mga judge na sina Rain Adeline Sophia Lapini Ganzo at Maria del Socorro Flores Leira. Ito naman yung mga abogado ho para sa panig ng prosekusyon o dun sa panig ng mga victims ay kinabibilangan ni na Attorney Joel Butuyan na napakinggan pa lang po natin. And then katabi ho niya sa kanyang kanang parte ay si Attorney Gilbert Andres. And nandun din itong si Attorney Paulina Mashida at yung iba pang miyembro ng council ng mga biktima, mga kabombo. And of course, doon naman sa panig ng depensa, nakita ho dyan itong si former Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea and former Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board Chairman Attorney Martin Delgra. And nandyan din ho itong si former Labor Secretary Silvestre Bebot Bello III at ito pang si Attorney Alfredo Lim Jr. at maging ang isa pa sa mga personalidad ho na nandun si Attorney Cesar Dulay, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. And of course, si Attorney Salpanelo din kabilang sa listahan, mga kabombo. So yan yung ilan ho sa naging development, pero nagkaroon muna sila ng break para naman dito sa kanilang proceedings upang mamaya ituloy uli ang takbo nitong pagdinig dyan sa International Criminal Court. Mga kabombo, ito ho ay Chamber 1 pa lamang ho, at ang ginagawa rito, hindi pa ito yung trial proper. Ito ho ay confirmation of charges pa lamang. So dito ay i-determine pa ito ng mga huwes na siyang humahawak nung naturang kaso. Hindi ibig sabihin na narinig natin ngayon ay ito na talaga yung opisyal na magiging kaso laban kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. So ididetermina pa ho ito mga kabombo hanggang sa muling magkaroon ng panibagong development ang naturang kaso, batay na rin sa mga lituntunin ng umiiral ho ng mga patakaran dyan sa International Criminal Court. Malayo ho kasi ito, no? Ilang ulit na ho na ipaliwanag ng mga ICC accredited lawyers, yung mga accredited ho na abogado ng International Criminal Court na taga rito sa atin, mga Pilipino rin, ay naipaliwanag na ho ito na ang mga proseso dyan sa International Criminal Court ay ibang-iba sa mga korte dito sa Pilipinas, lalo na yung sa lower court. Kaya ho ay hindi maaring tignan ng may parehong perspektibo. Kaya naman ay tayo nakaantabay kung ano yung magiging mga takbo pa ng mga development dyan sa International Criminal Court. And dahil dito ay nakabreak, mamaya tutunghayan naman natin ang iba pang mga panayam ho natin. At so subukan natin muli makausap ang ilan pa sa mga personalidad na nakausap natin dati dyan sa The Hague upang makahingi po tayo ng mga karagdagang update sa mga kaganapan pa ho doon. Una-una, yung concern ho sa sitwasyon din ng atin mga kababayan, naglahad ho ng kanilang interes na magsagawa ng mga aktibidad yung ilan ho sa mga kababayan natin pro and anti-Duterte, no? At meron ho silang mga events dyan sa labas ng International Criminal Court. So titignan ho natin kung natuloy, and of course isa sa malaking consideration, kumusta yung panahon po dyan, no? Dahil kung titignan sa mga nakalipas na araw, ay napakalamig ho pala ng temperatura dyan sa the Netherlands. So ang time difference naman natin ay 7 oras. Advance tayo ng 7 oras. Ibig sabihin ay nasa bandang magtatanghali na ho dyan sa The Hague. At yan ho yung ating malaking pagkakaiba sa kanila. Dito naman sa atin ay gumagabi na, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. So, kanina nakausap po natin ang ilan sa mga personalities na yung mga kababayan ho natin na nandun mismo sa The Hague. So, at this point ay sinusubukan ho natin makontak uli ang atin hong mga kababayan dyan na siyang at least itong proceedings nakikita ho natin. But how about yung sa labas? How about yung reaction ng mga tao na nakasubaybay din ho dyan sa The Hague? So yan yung ating titignan din maya-maya lamang, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. So oras natin ay meron na ho tayo, mga kabombo, mga Kastar Nation, na nasa 23 minuto bago ang pagsapit ho ng ikapito ng gabi. At tuloy-tuloy pa rin tayo dito sa mga kaganapan sa pagtugaygay ho natin dyan sa International Criminal Court. At kukuha pa tayo ng iba pang mahalagang panayam sa pagkakataong ito, mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. Nakahanay pa sa atin hong ilang makakausap ang isa ho sa mga nakatuon din ng atensyon ho dito, ang presidente ng National Union of People's Lawyers. Makuhanan din ho natin ang kanyang saloobin hinggil ho dito sa mga kaganapan na, well, from the very start ay nakatugaygay na rin ho sila dito. Makuha po natin yung kanilang saloobin hinggil dyan sa mga bagay po na yan, mga kabombo. Okay, so at this point, Direkta, kuha muna tayo ng update mula ho dun sa The Hague. Nasa linya at nagbabalik si Ginoong Joel Vega. Pabatiin natin muli sa Bombo Radio Philippines. Magandang gabi po dito sa Pilipinas at magandang tanghali naman dyan po sa The Netherlands. Kumusta po kayo, Ginoong Joel Vega? Si Bombo Dennis Jamito po ito. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Jancis, and also thank you for having me. Okay naman dito, marami pong Pilipino ang sumasbaybay sa itong hearing sa ICC. At sa ngayon po may breaks, alam niyo na may break, at marami pong nanonood dito sa organisasyong Duterte Panagutin na ako po ay kasama sa kanila. So napanood po namin yung unang bahagi noong hearing.
Okay, pakikibalita lang ho kami, ano? May mga rally-rally din ba na nagaganap po sa mga oras po na ito? Dahil kayo ay kabilang doon sa Duterte Panagutin Group, may activities ho ba dyan sa labas ng International Criminal Court, and papaano ho ito tumatakbo knowing na medyo mahigpit din ang mga patakaran ho dyan? Papaano ho ang sistema?
Okay. Oo, merong rally kaninang umaga mula alas 7 ng 7:30 ng umaga hanggang alas 9. Yun po ay ang meron pong tawag dito permiso mula sa pulisya ng The Hague. May higit po 100 katao na inorganisa ng migrante, bayan, at Duterte Panagutin Network ang dumating at nag-assembly po doon sa harap ng ICC. Kasama po ang pamilya ng mga biktima ng EJ case at inilahad nila ang kanilang pag-asa na magkaroon ng hustisya sa darating na mga araw. Nagmarcha po mula sa isang hospital na malapit sa ICC hanggang dito sa ICC at dumating po after 30 minutes doon sa harap ng ICC. Sa nakita niyo pong video, meron pong dalang mga banners at mga slogans na umuudyok sa ICC na ituloy ang trial. Ayun ang udyok at ang pag-asa ng mga pamilya ng mga biktima.
Ginong Vega, maitanong ko na rin ho, dahil may mga ganyang activities, ano ho ba yung weather condition ngayon dyan? Knowing na makaka-apekto ho ito, kung babad sila dyan sa labas, ano ho ba panahon po dyan? Taglamig o nagtapos na yung panahon ho ng winter? Ano pong sitwasyon?
Medyo hindi lumamig. 2 weeks ago, a week ago, mas malamig po. Bali mga 1 degree, 2 degrees. Ngayon po ay naging 8, 9 degrees. Kaya medyo komportable kami. Pero kailangan pa rin po ng jacket kasi kung walang jacket ay malamig po. Hindi ko pala nasagot yung tanong mo tungkol sa seguridad. Meron pong alert ang pulisya ng The Hague na nandoon po sila nakaabang. Pero hindi po masyadong marami ang kapulisan. Hindi kagaya noong September last year. Ngayon po ay medyo isa lang o dalawa lang na pulisyang sasakyan ang nakita ko kanina. At very orderly naman ang pagmarcha doon sa ICC. So wala pong incidenting pangyayari.
Nabalitaan ho kasi namin na yung mga pro-Duterte, meron din silang activities. And here comes yung inyong panig. Meron din po kayong mga kasamahan dyan na nagdala ng mga banner. Hindi naman ho ba nagkakaroon ng tensyon sa pagitan ng magkabilang panig dyan ho sa may harapan ng International Criminal Court?
Hindi naman po. Naiwasan din po kasi ang aming usapin ay mula alas 7 hanggang alas 9 at yung pulisya ay pinayagan naman ang Duterte Group mula alas 9 hanggang alas 10 yata or alas 11. So wala pong direct na confrontation o paghaharap kasi po ay magkaiba po yung oras na block nila. At kami po naman ay may instructions na magprotesta na matahimik na paraan. At wala pong nangyari sa umaga na ito, mabuti naman at walang nangyari.
Ano ho ang plano ho ninyo dyan? Dahil mukhang sa susunod na araw, meron pa uling continuation and 26 and 27, meron pa rin ho na bahagi ng confirmation of charges na proceedings dyan sa International Criminal Court. Ano ho ito? Dyan na magstay sa malapit ho sa bahagi ng The Hague o sasadyain lang ito the moment na tutuloy na uli itong proceedings?
Opo, marami pong aktibidades ang nakahanda sa susunod na mga araw. Bukas ay meron pong marcha uli at sa Miyerkules ay merong pagdiriwang noong selebrasyon ng People Power 1 at sa Huwebes meron pong misa at sa Biyernes meron pong yung closing na meron pong yung administrative or organizational na pagtitipon-tipon at sa Sabado ay yung pang-closing po na press conference. So punong-puno po ang schedule sa linggo na to. At umaasa kami na dadami ang a-attend. Hindi lang po naka-attend yung ibang mga taga-Netherlands, for example, kasi po ay may trabaho. Pero ang karamihan dito ay galing sa UK, sa Germany, sa Belgium, sa Italy at France. Sila po ay nakikituloy o nasa hotel sa mga kaibigan nila, kaya dito lang sa Dahig. Kami po naman, kagaya ko na nakatira sa Netherlands, ay galing po kami sa iba't ibang syudad. So, yung iba sa Utrecht, sa Amsterdam, pumupunta lang kami dito sa araw na mismo. At bumabalik din kami sa bahay namin mamayang gabi. Pero babalik din kami sa mga darating na araw, kagaya ng Miyerkules o Huwebes at Biyernes.
Dahil natunghayan natin pare-pareho yung unang bahagi nitong confirmation of charges proceedings, are you satisfied dun sa oras na binibigay sa magkabilang panig ng International Criminal Court Pretrial Chamber 1, Ginoong Vega?
Actually po, mas maigi po sana kung mas mahaba at mas malawak yung oras. Siguro pwede nilang i-adjust sa mga susunod na mga araw o linggo o buwan kung matutuloy sa trial mismo. Medyo nakakabitin nga po kasi 30 minutes lang. Pero ayun po ang binigay ng korte at alam naman nila yung kanilang mga proseso at siguro naman baka magkasya din yung sasabihin ng mga abogado at ng prosecution. Pero totoo po na medyo nakakabitin po yung maikli na paghahanda or oras na ibinigay. Pero sa ngayon po, sa nakita ko, personal na opinion ko po, okay naman sa akin yung oras na ibinigay ngayong umaga.
Finally, reaksyon na lang po ninyo dahil yung mismong presensya ni former President Rodrigo Duterte ay hindi ho nasilayan ngayon dyan. So kayo, anong masasabi ho ninyo? Dahil humiling ng pagliban, naglabas ho siya ng waiver and pinagbigyan naman ho ito ng pre-trial chamber 1. So kayo bilang observer dyan, ano ang inyong masasabi?
Nakakatawa po kasi noong mga nakarang taon, noong po siya ay presidente, ay napakatapang niya pong magsabi na siya po ay haharap sa ICC. At actually sinabi niya pa na, sabi nga ng prosecutor, sisipain at haharapin. Pero ngayon po, siya po ay naduduwag at nawala dito. Pero po ang mga biktima, ang pamilya ng biktima ay lumakas ang loob at nagpunta pa dito at binastusan ang kanilang pagpunta dito. Kaya nakaka-disappoint po yung nangyari na hindi siya pumunta. At para sa akin po, personal na opinion ko po, kung siya po ay abogado din po at kung inosente po siya ay wala pong pagngamba o pagtatakot o pagduda na harapin ang mga akusasyon. Kasi ito na po yung panahon na ipaliwanag niya kung ano ang kanyang punto vista sa magandang paraan at hindi po idadaan sa galit o sa disinformation. Kaya po nakakahinayang po at nakaka-disappoint na wala siya po dito. Actually po noong nag-rally, may mga sumisigaw sa aming grupo na yung kaduwagan ng kabilang kampo ay nakakadismaya po.
With that, maraming salamat po at patuloy po kaming hingi ng mga update kung may mga development pa mula po dyan sa inyong panig unless meron ho kayong mensahe na gusto pang iparating.
Oo, ang pagtitipon po namin dito ay hindi lang po sa EG case ng Duterte. Hanggang ngayon po marami pa pong EG case sa gobyerno ng Pangulong Marcos, nagpapatuloy pa rin po ang disappearances, ang pagkidnap ng mga political activists, mga estudyante, mga magsasaka. Kaya po ay ito po ay nakakangamba kasi po ay walang pagbabago kailanman sa panahon man ni Duterte o ni Marcos. Kaya kami po ay magbabantay at hindi po titigil sa pagbabantay kasi po ang EJ case ay hanggang ngayon ay nandito pa. Actually po according to Human Rights Watch, mahigit na po 800 ang biktima under the present administration.
Salamat po sa oras na inilaan po ninyo sa Bombo Radio Philippines. Magandang araw po.
Maraming salamat po.
Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, nakausap po natin muli si Ginong Joel Vega, isa ho sa mga kababayan ho natin na naninirahan na ho dun sa the Netherlands. Nabanggit niya nga ho na dyan na sila nakatira sa naturang bansa pero tutok pa rin ang kanilang atensyon dito ho sa mga development kaugnay ng kinakaharap ho na kaso ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Nako muna tayo dyan sa Palasyo Malacanang, mga kabombo. Ito kaya si Pangulong Marcos ay nakatutok din dito sa mga kaganapan na ito dyan sa International Criminal Court. At ano kaya masasabi ng Palasyo Malacanang doon sa iba pang mga usapin na mga napapanahon po ngayon, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. May balita si Bombo Annalise Soberano.
Kinumpirma ng Malacanang na hindi personal na iminonitor ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ang naging confirmation of charges hearing ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa International Criminal Court ngayong araw. Ayon kay Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro, mas pinili ng Pangulo tutukan ang mga interes ng bansa at mga gawaing direktang makakatulong sa sambayanang Pilipino. Binigyan din ng palasyo na ang kasong crimes against humanity na kinakaharap ni Duterte ay itinuturing na personal na usapin. Ayon kay Castro, abala ang Pangulo sa pag-monitor ng iba pang mga gawain sa ating bansa. Samantala, naghain naman kanina ng resolusyon ang mambabatas mula sa Makabayan Bloc upang hikayatin ang gobyerno na muling bumalik sa jurisdiction ng International Criminal Court. Pinangunahan ito ni ACT Teachers Party List Representative Antonio Tino, Gabriela Party List Representative Sara Elago, at Kabataan Representative Rene Co ang paghahain ng House Resolution number 809. Layunin nitong ipakita sa international community na iginagalang ng Pilipinas ang karapatang pantao at ang mga kasunduang internasyonal. Ayon sa resolusyon, ang muling pagsali ng Pilipinas sa ICC at pagpirma sa Rome Statute ay magpapakita ng malinaw na mensahe na iginagalang ng bansa ang buhay at naninindigan laban sa impunity at karahasang dulot ng Estado. Samantala, naniniwala naman si ML Party List Representative Leila de Lima na ang pagsisimula ng confirmation of charges hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Duterte ay hakbang tungo sa pananagutan. Sa kanyang privilege speech ngayong araw dito sa plenaryo ng Kamara, sinabi ni de Lima na hindi ito usapin ng politika o paghihiganti, kundi isang pananagutan. Anya, ang mga pagpatay sa ilalim ng war on drugs ay maaaring pumasok sa kategoryang crimes against humanity dahil umano sa lawak at sistematikong paraan ng mga ito. Binigyan din ni de Lima na walang batas na nagsasabing kailangan dumaan sa Korte ng Pilipinas ang warrant ng ICC sa ilalim ng Republic Act number 9851 na maaaring umanong makipagtulungan ang gobyerno sa International Criminal Court. Ipinaliwanag pa ni de Lima ang prinsipyo ng complementarity na papasok ang ICC kung ang isang bansa ay hindi kayang magsagawa ng tunay na at malayang investigasyon. Bombo Anali Montaño Soberano nag-uulat. And this is Bombo Radio Philippines, the number one and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radio, Bombo!
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, tuloy-tuloy pa rin ho tayo sa pagtutok dito sa mga kaganapan sa International Criminal Court. At this point, para ho doon sa mga late tuners, ay nakabreak lamang ho yung pre-trial Chamber 1 sa kanilang confirmation of charges hearing. At kanina na ipresenta na ho yung initial na pagharap ng mga abogado para kay former President Duterte and ganun din yung panig ho ng prosecution o yung Victims Council ay nariyan din ho mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. So yan yung ilan lamang sa mga kaganapan kanina na itutuloy pa rin ho natin maya-maya lamang. Samantala, habang papalapit ang unang anibersaryo ng pagkakapiit kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte sa International Criminal Court, iginigiit ng isang mambabatas na ginagawa lamang na panakibutas sa politika ang dating punong ehekutibo. Ayon kay puwersa ng Pilipinong Pandagat, Party List Representative Harold Duterte ay wala raw kinalaman sa paghahanap ng hustisya talaga para sa mga biktima ng war on drugs. Ang sinimulang confirmation of charges kani-kanina na idinaraos dyan sa dahig sa bahagi ng Netherlands. So ayon sa kanya, diversionary tactics umano ito at panawagan nila na bumalik sa tunay na issue at ang pagtugon sa mga suliranin ng ating mga kababayan dito ho sa ating bansa. To recap lang ho ng ilang mga kaganapan dyan sa International Criminal Court at kumalap tayo mamaya ng iba pang mga reaksyon hinggil ho sa mga development na ito at hong kukunin yan maya-maya lamang. Samantala, sa pagtutok ho ng ating coverage team, nariyan din ang tinugay-gaya ni Bombo Genesis Ratio, yung iba pang mga development hinggil pa rin dito sa usapin ng International Criminal Court proceedings. May balita si Bombo Genesis Ratio.
Bombo Dennis, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, habang hinihintay natin yung ikalawang session ngayong araw, Pebrero 23, dito pa rin sa confirmation of charges hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Balikan lamang natin, Bombo Dennis, yung naging opening message kanina ni Attorney Joel Butuyan at ipinagdidiinan kasi ng International Criminal Court Pre-Trial Chamber 1 yung pangangailangan na maprotektahan yung mga biktima ng drug war ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte at yung mga testigo laban sa kanya. Doon sa confirmation of charges hearing pa rin sa kaso ng dating Pangulo ay iniatas ni Pre-Trial Chamber 1 Judge Yulia Antonella Motok sa lahat ng mga abogado mula sa defense at maging sa prosecution panel na iwasan ang pagbanggit sa totoong pangalan nitong mga biktima at mga testigo. Ayon nga kay Judge Motok, ito ay upang matiyak na maprotektahan ang pagkakilanlan at masiguro ang kaligtasan ng mga biktima at mga testigo. Sa halip na banggitin, Bombo Dennis, mga kabombo, ang pangalan nito mga biktima, pinayuhan ni Judge Motok ang mga abogado na gumamit na muna ng alias kapag babanggitin nila ang sinumang testigo o sinumang biktima. Sa kabilang banda naman, Bombo Dennis, sa naging opening statement nga ng tinatawag na Common Legal Representative ng Drug War Victims na si Attorney Joel Butuyan, nakasaad dito ang kahandaan ng mga biktima ng drug war na makibahagi sa proceedings. Ayon kay Attorney Butuyan, handa ang 477 o 497 na victims na makibahagi sa kabuuan ng pagdinig at buong pusong humihiling ng hustisya kasunod yan ng dinanas na karahasan sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Duterte. Inihayag din ng batikang abogado o Filipino lawyer ang pagkadismaya ng mga biktima sa desisyon ng Pre-Trial Chamber 1 na payagang hindi dumalo si dating Pangulong Duterte sa pagdinig. Ayon pa rin kay Attorney Butuyan, ang makita ang dating Pangulo na binabasahan at pinapaharap sa mga kasong ibinibintang sa kanya ay isang mahalagang kasangkapan sana para sa pagbibigay ng hustisya sa mga biktima. Balikan natin, Bombo Dennis, mga kabombo, yung bahagi ng opening message ni Attorney Joel Butuyan.
Madam President, Your Honors, by way of an opening statement, we convey the views and concerns of the 497 victims authorized to participate in these proceedings. At the outset, Your Honors, we communicate the very deep disappointment of the victims at the decision allowing Rodrigo Duterte not to be present in this stage of confirmation of charges. The sight of Mr. Duterte being read and being confronted with the grave and horrible charges against him would have constituted a vital component of justice for the victims. This case symbolically represents the last boat that the victims can board to go on a journey in search of justice for their loved ones who were brutally killed upon the orders of Mr. Duterte. If this chamber prevents the boat from sailing by not confirming the charges. The victims will forever be moored in an island where the nights are filled with the screams and cries of their massacred loved ones. There is absolutely no other recourse for the victims. No less than former Philippine Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla admitted just a few months ago.
Bahagi yan, Bombo Dennis, mga kabumbo, ng naging pahayag ni Attorney Joel Butuyan, isa sa mga accredited lawyer, Filipino accredited lawyer ng International Criminal Court. Kung babalikan nga natin, ay nabanggit din yung pangalan kanina ni Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla at sinabi ni Attorney Butuyan na maging siya ay aminado na mahirap litisin yung kaso laban kay dating Pangulong Duterte dito sa Pilipinas dahil wala daw, and I quote, makitang mga ebidensya, walang mga police report, walang batayan at walang mahanap na sapat na testigo. Ito yung mga kinote kanina ni Attorney Joel Butuyan doon sa International Criminal Court. Kaya kailangan anya na ang International Criminal Court ang maglitis dito sa kaso ni dating Pangulong Duterte dahil nga doon sa mga naunang pronouncement ng ilang official dito sa Pilipinas. Pangunahin dito ang kalihim ng Department of Justice. So yan muna ang ating mga updates, Bombo Dennis, sa mga ibabato para na rin sa mga kababayan natin ngayong hapon. Kasabay ng ating patuloy na pagtutok sa confirmation of charges hearing laban kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Bombo Dennis.
Okay, Bombo Genesis, isang punto lamang, yung confirmation of charges na ito, ano ang inaasahan natin na magiging kabuuan ngayong araw na ito o ngayong gabi? Hanggang alas 10 pala ito, Bombo Genesis. So anong ine-expect natin dito sa kabuuan ng first day na proceeding sa Bombo Genesis?
Batay dun sa naunang pahayag, Bombo Dennis, ng International Criminal Court or naunang communication ng International Criminal Court, ayun, natapos na nga kanina yung statement ng prosecution at mamaya ay makapakinggan din natin yung magiging pahayag o statement ng defense panel, Bombo Dennis. And then doon sa third session ay yun na yung magiging pahayag na rin ng International Criminal Court judges. Inaasahan din natin doon sa last session, Bombo Dennis, batay na rin sa nauna nating interview kay Attorney Christina Conti, ang kumakatawan ngayon doon sa mga biktima. Inaasahan natin na maipepresenta rin yung ilang mga biktima. Pero tulad nga ng ating nabanggit kanina, hindi nga papangalanan yung mga biktima, bagkus tatawagin lamang sila sa kanilang mga alias na ibinigay ng korte sa kanila, Bombo Dennis. By the way, para sa mga late tuners, inaakusahan si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte ng 3 counts of crimes against humanity. So batay doon sa narinig natin kanina, na monitor natin kanina doon sa hearing, Bombo Dennis, ang una rito ay murder as crimes against humanity at ito'y nangyari sa may Davao City noong si Pangulong Duterte ay alkalde pa ng naturang lungsod. Umabot daw sa 19 na biktima ang natukoy dito na sinasabing nangyari sa pagitan ng 2013 at ng June 2016. Yung period na ito, Bombo Dennis, 2013 hanggang June 2016, ito yung period kung saan alkalde si dating Pangulong Duterte ng Davao City. At yung June 2016, yung buwan before siya nanumpa bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas. Ang pangalawa dito ay murder as crimes against humanity sa mga high-value targets sa iba't ibang lokasyon sa buong Pilipinas sa ilalim ng kanyang pamumuno na bilang Pangulo ng Bansa. Umabot naman ito sa 14 o 14 na biktima ang natukoy sa pagitan naman ito, Bombo Dennis, ng 2016 hanggang July 2017. Batay pa rin po ito dun sa binasa kanina ng judge na si Judge Motok. So, ito yung mga 14 victims at napatay sila sa mga police operation between 2016 at 2017. Yung ikatlong akusasyon ay murder and attempted murder as crimes against humanity sa mga isinagawang barangay clearance operation sa iba't ibang lokasyon sa buong Pilipinas bilang Pangulo na ng ating bansa. Dito, Bombo Dennis, natukoy ng International Criminal Court ang hanggang sa 45 o 45 victims kung saan doon sa 45 victims na ito, 43 o 43 yung sinasabing napatay. Since napatay sila, kwalipikado daw ito bilang murder cases. Habang yung dalawa, Bombo Dennis, ay kwalipikado bilang attempted murder kasi nakaligtas at nabuhay, tuluyang nabuhay itong mga biktima dito. So ito yung gist ng mga cases na inaakusa laban kay dating Pangulong Duterte, Bombo Dennis.
Okay. At sa puntong ito, babalikan natin na Bombo Genesis, yung mga kaganapan pa ron. From your end, Bombo Genesis?
Sige, maraming salamat, Bombo Dennis, habang nagpapatuloy yung ating pagtutok. Back to you, Bombo Dennis.
Kabombo at mga Castor Nation, nagpapatuloy na rin, umusad na ho itong confirmation of charges hearing at ating tunghayan, mga kabombo at mga Castor Nation.
The spread of impunity in the Philippines, and I will reassure you. The plague of impunity has spread. The plague of impunity among Filipinos in the Philippines, even among expatriate Filipinos in faraway lands like here in The Hague. When we reported to the victims that their external legal representatives, feel like fugitives who avoid our own countrymen here in The Hague because chances are they are Duterte clones, they express their utmost concern that if we, their lawyers, feel threatened by mini Dutertes in a foreign country, we should imagine the far more intense fear they live with every day in their communities teeming with mini Dutertes. The victims also wish to convey that if the judges of this honorable chamber can be subjected to online harassment by Duterte clones, we should imagine the level of vulnerability the victims are exposed to in their poor villages. Your Honors, there is only one solution to stop the impunity propagated by Mr. Duterte from continuing to bring harm and suffering to the victims. And that is for this honorable chamber to confirm the charges so that witnesses can testify and evidence can be presented on the horrible crimes committed by Mr. Duterte. The testimonies and evidence presented will inoculate these mini Dutertes from the virus of impunity that has infected them. When they will see and hear the utter cruelty, the sheer brutality, in other words, the brazen inhumanity of the crimes committed by Mr. Duterte, and the humanity of those whose lives were violently taken, it will rekindle the embers of humanity that still remain in their hearts. Many of these mini Dutertes or Duterte clones are actually victims of massive doses of fake news widely circulated online. They need to be vaccinated with the truth, and the truth vaccine can only come from the testimonies of victims and evidence presented in a trial before this court. Truth is the antidote to the virus of impunity, Your Honors. The victims dread a future where charges are not confirmed in this case. It will mean that the virus of impunity will continue to spread and infect many more. Victims fear that Duterte clones will become an even bigger group that can elect another apostle of impunity as the Philippines' next leader. If that happens, an even more serious condition of impunity can take place in the Philippines, possibly worse than the orgy of violence that happened from 2011 to 2019, and this time there will be no ICC to run to for assistance and help. The victims humbly beseech this honorable chamber to reaffirm the two crucial objectives of the ICC identified in the preamble of the Rome Statute. First, to prosecute and punish the most serious crimes that deeply shock the conscience of humanity. And second, to put an end to impunity and to contribute to the prevention of crimes of unimaginable atrocities. If this chamber confirms the charges, this court will achieve its first objective of prosecuting and, if convicted, punishing Mr. Duterte for the unspeakable crimes he is charged with. But achieving the first objective will not automatically make this court attain its second objective. Merely putting forward the evidence gathered and the theory of liability of the prosecution will not necessarily resolve second objective. This court should allow victims to testify, and the record of the proceedings must
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, nagsasalita po sa mga oras na ito ang isa sa tumatayong abogado para sa mga biktima o yung tinatawag nating Victims Council. No? At yan ay sa katauhan ni Attorney Joel Butuyan na madalas din ho natin na nakakapanayam dito sa Bombo Network News. At sa puntong ito ay dinidetalye po niya yung mga rason kung bakit kailangan na mag-proceed itong kaso ni former President Rodrigo Duterte at makumpirma mismo ng International Criminal Court yung naturang mga aligasyon ay pinupukol sa dating presidente. Ituloy natin mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation ang yung legal proceedings dyan po sa International Criminal Court.
Mr. Duterte, who proudly and publicly proclaimed his aspirations of following the footsteps of Adolf Hitler when he said, quote, Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now there are 3 million drug addicts. I'd be happy to slaughter them, unquote. And yet, he is worshipped by a huge number of Filipinos. In so many countries, you will need to hide your adoration of Hitler. Mr. Duterte flaunted it, and his fanatics are unaffected by it. Mr. Duterte has pronounced so many other horrible declarations meant to promote and encourage impunity, as it will be detailed tomorrow by my colleagues. And yet, he is idolized by a multitude of Filipinos. The defense will claim that he was merely bombastic and acerbic when he made these statements. But if he were merely being pompous and flippant, the people who were killed should be alive and laughing today at his supposed pranks and stunts. Mr. Duterte did not only order the mass killing of people suspected of being drug personalities, Your Honors. He smeared them with accusations of being rapists, murderers, and dangerous criminals. Mr. Duterte imposed an inflexible condemnation that if you are a drug personality, you are automatically a dangerous criminal who has engaged in unimaginable atrocities. The families of those killed did not only suffer the loss of a loved one, their families were even disgraced with being associated with a rapist, murderer, or dangerous criminal. Even after their loved ones were murdered, many families were subjected to deplorable injustices. Instead of gunshot wounds as cause of death in their death certificates, families were shocked to see pneumonia, heart attack, stroke, sepsis, and other false causes of death that were instead written down. Other families were charged substantial amounts, sums the impoverished families could not afford, just to retrieve the bodies of their loved ones from the funeral parlor who were suspected by the families of being in cahoots with the police officers. Some family members were even arrested and imprisoned by police officers on false charges and for the purpose of preventing them from complaining. In one particular incident, Your Honors, a young man and his common-law wife were sleeping in their shanty when men in civilian clothes knocked down the door to their house. The men dragged the wife out of the room. The husband was already surrendering, and he even started to strip naked to show he had no drugs or firearm on his body. He said in the Filipino language, "Sir, malinis po ako, maghuhubad ako, sir." Translation in English, "Sir, I am clean. I will strip naked, sir." Still without mercy, the men shot and killed him. After killing the husband, they arrested the wife and accused her with falsified and non-bailable charges. When the deceased mother and cousin went to the police station to find out what happened to the young man, because they were not in the scene of the crime when it happened, the two were also summarily arrested and charged with fabricated crimes. If the Honorable Chamber confirms the charges in this case, The witnesses will and evidence will show that those who were smeared by Mr. Duterte before they were killed, they were inside their houses, sleeping peacefully with their families, eating meals with their loved ones, playing with their children, or hugging their wives. Others were merely walking along the street, having snacks at the roadside eatery, or plying the road, earning a poor man's living. They were all doing ordinary, peaceful, and plain human activities. Confirming the charges will restore the dignity of those who were killed and the honor of their families. The prejudice suffered by the families of those killed did not begin and end with the killings of their loved ones. Each killing set off a chain reaction that is continuously churning out a daily crucible of harm, damage, and loss. By masterminding the mass murder of mere suspects, Mr. Duterte has brought irreparable and endless harm to the families. An overwhelming majority of those killed were the sole breadwinners of poor families. These families were dependent on each day's wage for their daily sustenance. They were hand-to-mouth families. With the death of their breadwinners, the widowed spouses, a majority of whom are women, have had to take on the roles of two parents. On top of taking care of their children and maintaining the household, the widowed spouses now have the additional burden of being breadwinners for their families. Families have been driven to even far more serious destitution, Your Honors. The damage to the children is immeasurable. Their development and upbringing have been permanently compromised. They have been walking through life with one missing parental limb. Losing a parent under very dire economic conditions and under the most violent circumstances results in wounds that will never heal and that will absolutely render them handicapped for life. And then there's the indescribable anguish of parents who lost a child. No parent is supposed to outlive a child. Parents suffer a lifetime of grief when a child dies ahead of them, and the lifetime grief is unimaginably worse when a child dies under the most inhuman circumstances. The crimes masterminded by Mr. Duterte did not only affect individuals but whole communities. Across the Philippines, numerous urban communities of the most impoverished villages were scarred by the violence and abuses wrought by a lawless anti-drug campaign that further worsened the misery and trauma of residents in marginalized communities. In one illustrative instance, Your Honors, after the father of a family was killed inside his house by police officers, the entire neighborhood was so traumatized that for almost 3 months, and during the coldest months in the Philippines, they abandoned their houses at night and instead slept in the open public market. They did not feel secure inside their houses because there would be no witnesses if the police would just barge in and shoot at them. In the public market, the presence of many witnesses, they thought, will deter the police from shooting and killing them. It is also the victim's view, Your Honors, that the charges should be confirmed because the resulting presentation of witnesses and evidence during the trial will force police and other law enforcement officers to confront the brazen depravity of the killing of civilians that they either personally committed or allowed to be committed during the Duterte reign of terror. In one operation, the police summarily killed 3 men, 2 brothers and 1 friend, in the very early morning. The police declared that the 3 were nanlaban. They fought back. But the neighbors saw otherwise. The whole neighborhood was so horrified at the macabre treatment of one of the fatalities. The bullet-ridden body of one of the 3 men was brought out from the second-floor window and dropped to the ground because the police could not bring the body out through the doorway. When the body hit the ground, the neighbors recoiled at hearing the body emit a cry, aray. Translation in English, ouch. The man was still alive when his body was thrown to the ground, and the police just left him to bleed to death. The trial will hold a mirror to the police force and compel them to see how they were turned into executioners and assassins, and their organization transformed into a gigantic criminal organization or turned into a killing machine by Mr. Duterte. The Philippine National Police and the drug enforcement agencies have not made any initiative to purify the corrupted minds of their officers and personnel to our knowledge. The trial in this case will be a tremendous teaching opportunity that can work to rectify the warped and depraved minds of Philippine security officers. The charges need to be confirmed, Your Honors, for the sake of the entire country, which has been desensitized or made numb by the massive incidents of impunity and the glorification of impunity promoted by Mr. Duterte. The whole Philippines needs to know the real story during those bloody years. There has been no opportunity for the entire country to really find out the whole truth of what happened. It has been hush-hush, tidbits of sporadic news, and always drowned out by trolls who mass produce and broadcast false, fake, and fabricated news. The victims also attach a very important historical significance to this case. If the chamber confirms the charges, the trial proceedings will produce a historical record of the most bloody period of post-war Philippine history, a duty that the Philippine justice system has refused to perform. The historical account on the mass murder of so many Filipinos during the Duterte regime needs to be accessible to our future generations, just like the Nuremberg trials and the Tokyo trials, so that they will learn from it and not repeat the same mistake of selecting and glorifying leaders who preach and practice impunity. The prosecution has presented 78 instances of murder and attempted murder, clarifying that these incidents are only representatives of the extent of the crimes committed against thousands of civilians, Your Honors. The victims beseech the Honorable Chamber to remember that Mr. Duterte's bloody rule, both in Davao City and nationwide, resulted in as many as 30,000 victims of killings, more than 300,000 victims of arbitrary imprisonment, and unaccounted numbers of victims of torture, sexual assault, and other forms of crimes against humanity. For many families in the Philippines, the charges brought for confirmation in these proceedings represent only a fraction of the reality the victims have endured. The victims beseech the Honorable Chamber to remember the hundreds of thousands of victims are banking on vicarious justice from this case. Finally, Your Honors.
Excuse me, Counsel, you have 5 minutes left.
Thank you. Finally, Your Honors, the victims wish to humbly underline that what is ultimately at stake in these proceedings is the supreme of all forms of human rights, the right to life. The right to life is the very foundation of every civilized society. The ancestors of every nation fought against invaders, colonizers, despotic monarchs, and fascist leaders in order to secure the right to life of their families, their communities, and the future generations. The heroes of every country sacrificed their lives to defend the right to life of their people. We as citizens of modern societies are inheritors and beneficiaries of the sacrifices of our ancestors who bequeathed to us the right to life. We owe it to them to defend the supreme legacy for our generation and for the generations to come. For the past few years, Your Honors, we have seen an increasing number of nation leaders who time-traveled from the Dark Ages and now swagger in modern times as if they own people's lives. These brutal and cruel leaders must be held to account for their brazen disregard of humankind's right to life. Our ancestors fought in the battlefield to secure a right to life. In these modern times, the battleground for the fight to protect our right to life is within the four walls of this honorable court. May the God of life, the God of humanity, guide the honorable members of this chamber. Thank you, Your Honors.
Merci beaucoup, Maître Judge Motog. Thank you very much, Counsel Butulyan. Now over to the defense. Mr. Kaufman, please.
And I thank Mr. Tuyan for his intervention, but I feel that I ought to remind him that this is a court of law which decides matters on the basis of evidence, not on the basis of political demagoguery, and not on the basis of a desire to effect regime change despite the democratic will. And certainly not on the basis of statements made by Ombudsman Jesus Crispin Remula, who professed that domestic justice will be denied, according to Mr. Butulyan, because of the lack of forensic reports and police reports. Now, I don't know which case Mr. Butulyan's metaphorical ship sailed into, but he clearly hasn't read the evidence. Whilst he was speaking, we examined the evidence, and out of that evidence, we found at least 35 reports substantiating 49 of the incidents which are mentioned in a document containing the charges. Your Honours, Rodrigo Duterte was and will always remain a unique phenomenon. His style of statesmanship was novel and unpalatable to many. His expletives and hyperbole grated, while his honesty and wild popularity irritated. He spoke openly, from the heart, sincerely and truthfully. And what a contrast between him and his successor in the Malacanang. For President Rudy, his word was his word, and the people knew it. For President Bong Bong, his word is for the wind, and the people will not forget it. Let me remind everyone of the letter which President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed, it's on the screen, and in which he gave a cast-iron undertaking that his government, and I quote, will not assist the ICC in any way, shape, or form. Well, as we know, he failed to keep that promise. Rodrigo Duterte was unconstitutional and unceremoniously hauled off to The Hague. And when called upon to defend his master's actions and the said letter at a Senate committee hearing, the then Secretary for Justice, once again Mr. Jesus Crispin Remula, persisted with the same dishonest theme. And I quote his words, "We did not assist the ICC. We continue with the very tenor of the letter that we did not assist the ICC and we did not have any contact with them." So he said, but with a document emanating from the prosecution team opposite and disclosed to us a mere week ago, not as information material to the preparation of our defence, but as exonerating evidence, we can now substantiate what we have suspected for a long time. The document comprises a transcript of a telephone call covertly recorded between four parties who cannot be mentioned in public, and one of these parties was boasting about how he was acting as the silent partner of President BBM, managing a scheme to funnel witnesses to this court while all the time ensuring that he could guarantee President BBM's plausible deniability. So it is indeed the defence case that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. set out to neutralise Rodrigo Duterte and his legacy. Yes, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, I used that legendary word, neutralise, so central and so essential to your case theory, because you know just as well as me that I'm using the term metaphorically. And now I turn to the substance of the charges, but before I do, a word or two about the geopolitical context. The scourge of illegal narcotics is not unique to the Philippines. As we all know, it afflicts Latin America, where I can name 3 countries where the death rate at the hands of vigilantes and law enforcement agents per capita population is higher than it ever was under Duterte. And as you should know, and you will hear from the prosecution, at any rate, the Philippines as a country is uniquely positioned to act as a transit hub for the trafficking of narcotics emanating from the cartels in China. And with or without Duterte, so we argue, the death rate would have kept on rising. Indeed, as we will prove with statistics and reports, the death rate flowing from narcotics-related crime actually increased after Rodrigo Duterte left.
Mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, ang nagsasalita naman sa puntong ito ay ang lead counsel ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte na si Nicholas Kaufman. Ito mga kabombo ay binibueltahan niya yung mga naging statement kanina ni Attorney Joel Butuyan kung saan ay ilang punto ang inilabas at kabilang yung pagbanggit kay Ombudsman Rimulya sa ilang punto, no? Bagay na inungkat naman ngayon ni Kaufman. And maliban ho dyan ay nabanggit din yung commitment umano ng Marcos administration na hindi makikipagtulungan sa International Criminal Court. Pero kalaunan ay ipinadala itong si former President Duterte sa the Netherlands o dyan sa The Hague para naman sa kasong kinakaharap nito, bagay na hindi umano tugma doon sa unang pahayag ng Pangulong Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. So i-check natin mga kabombo kung ano magiging reaksyon dito ng Palasyo Malacanang doon sa pagkakabanggit ukol doon sa mga prior statement ni Pangulong Marcos and doon sa development ng kaso kung saan ay nauungkat yung mga dating mga pahayag at yan mga kabombo ang takbo ng kaso nitong si former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Pero ilang minuto pa lamang ho nagsasalita itong si Kaufman at may mga punto din naman siya na inuungkat, no? At maliban ho dyan, may iba pang miyembro ng defense team ang present din doon sa proceedings ng International Criminal Court. At karamihan po dyan nanggaling dito sa Pilipinas. At kinabibilangan yan ng dating Executive Secretary na si Salvador Medialdea at ganun din yung iba pang mga lawyers na dating appointee ni former President Rodrigo Duterte, just like Secretary Bebot Bello ng DOLE o ng Department of Labor and Employment at ganun din itong si Attorney Martin Delgra na dati hong pinuno ng Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board, pati na yung iba pa mga personalidad na present din ho doon upang idepensa naman ang panig ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. So yan mga kabombo, no? Ang mga kaganapan. So doon sa ating mga late tuners, pareho po itong binibigyan ng oras ang panig ng prosekusyon o ng mga kampo ng mga biktima at yung panig dito si former President Rodrigo Duterte. So at least mga kabombo, natitimbang-timbang natin sa mga pagkakataong ito yung statement na magkabilang panig upang kayo naman ay maobserbahan din ho yung takbo ng kaso objectively kung ano nga kaya ang magiging kahihinatnan nito hanggang sa pagpapasya ho ng mga huwes ng International Criminal Court. Ituloy natin mga kabombo ang takbo ng pagdinig dyan sa The Hague.
As a public prosecutor in Davao, Rodrigo Duterte developed a lifelong passion, some would say an enduring obsession, for law and order, something for which he unapologetically enforced throughout his time as mayor of Davao City. Not as the prosecution say, through sowing murder and mayhem, but through winning the love, respect, and admiration of his fellow citizens. The very same citizens who continued to re-elect him time after time, term after term, on no less than 7 occasions over more than 2 decades. And throughout his 20 or so years tenure as the mayor of Davao, Rodrigo Duterte and his family transformed that city from an outpost of communist insurgency and criminal violence into what is now one of the safest cities, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world. This was indeed the so-called Davao model, which the prosecution wants to persuade you was code for unbridled criminal violence. And this was the type of leader that the Filipino nation wanted in 2016. So, Rodrigo Duterte was elected into power, not in spite of, but specifically because of his firm and uncompromising commitment to upholding law and order. And after his election as president, Rodrigo Duterte remained a man of the people, without seeking to patronize the people. Gung-ho in his ways and with a belligerent tone, he spoke the tough tongue of the street, not the dissembling discourse of international diplomacy. He said what the people wanted to hear, but he said it in a way that offended sensibilities of world leaders unaccustomed to hearing it, one in particular, and that was what set him on the slippery slope to a prison cell in The Hague. And let me tell you how it works. It starts with the media, controlled by the powerful and the politically influential. With a sensational headline and a twisted editorial slant, the moguls sell their papers while promoting the partisan agenda of their backers in power. They highlight the salacious content while ignoring the true context, because that is what captivates the reader. And so it was with Rodrigo Duterte, whose speeches were fertile fodder for his enemies and detractors. A man whose hyperbole, bluster and rhetoric, once published, became a natural target for privately funded NGOs and human rights activists, a loose collective more commonly known as civil society. These people descended upon the Philippines to advance an agenda even more lacking in objectivity than that of the media, and heavily funded by tycoons with even grander designs, they print their glossy reports, replete with iconic photographic images of grieving families and dead bodies in rain-swept, nighttime crime scenes, all dramatically illuminated with the fluorescent glow of neon. Images carefully crafted to shock the conscience and to sway the emotions, and, I may say, to be used by the prosecutor when they don't even relate to the charges. And they gave their slick reports bold titles lifted straight out of a James Bond movie, such as License to Kill, One Shot to the Head, You Can Die Any Time, or simply, They Just Kill. The photographers are feted and their shots exhibited as art all over the world, and the brave journalists who act as their sources win awards and Nobel Prizes. And slowly but surely, their narrative becomes the sacred, unchallengeable, and unshakable truth. And so the pressure builds up, and the academics who haunt the corridors of the progressive left law faculties far away in the United States tweet their research and publish their articles pontificating about crimes against humanity, systematic attacks against the civilian population, and they point their finger at one man alone, and bandy about slogans such as accountability and the prevention of impunity. They give their gratuitous advice on what should be done, sometimes academics who formerly worked alongside the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Communications and complaints are filed, and the rest, as they say, is history. In any event, we're not gathered here today to judge a man on the basis of his coarse attitude or his vulgar language. This court has convened a confirmation hearing to verify whether substantial grounds exist to believe that Rodrigo Duterte, the people's president, together with various so-called co-perpetrators, over the years of his governance, devised a criminal policy of wholesale and wanton murder. And since we are in a court of law, it is worth stressing, although I should not have to, cases are decided on the basis of evidence, not supposition, not rumour, not spicy gossip, and certainly not on the basis of political rhetoric and bluster. Because at the end of the day, were it not for those belligerent and controversial speeches, there would have been no impetus to bring the People's President to The Hague. And when the prosecution's evidence is examined, I would ask you to keep an open mind and to question not just whether that evidence has been selectively presented, but whether there exists evidence which the prosecution has failed to produce. And I say this with justifiable cause, particularly with respect to the Duterte rhetoric, as we will prove during the substantive part of our submissions. The notorious speeches on which the prosecution relies have been cherry-picked to suit its narrative, while ignoring the many other speeches when the former president tempered his bombastic language by clear reference to the principle of lawful self-defense. We, the defense, have read as many of these speeches as we can find. In fact, in our poky little office on the top floor of the furthest building away in this complex, we have a counter which ticks and ticks. And whenever we come across a speech which contradicts the prosecution's murder theory by reference to self-defense, we give a cheer. And the counter goes up once more, and we celebrate one more nail in the coffin of the prosecution's case theory. As the statistics stand as of today, in contrast to the 20 speeches on which the prosecution relies to prove incitement to kill, we have found 35 more which say the complete opposite. Let me give you 2 examples from the very speeches that the deputy prosecutor himself cited today. Let's refer first of all to the famous Pietà speech, which the deputy prosecutor referred to. So, this is what the deputy prosecutor said. Those of you who are still sober, those who haven't tried illegal drugs, if you don't want to die or get hurt, don't rely on the priests, including human rights advocates. They won't be able to prevent deaths, and so it goes on. But if we look further on in the very same speech, something which maybe the deputy prosecutor didn't do, this is what he had to say. To our police officers and other officials, do your job, and you will have the unwavering support of the office of the President. I will be with you all the way. Abuse your authority, and there will be hell to pay, for you will have become worse than criminality itself. Well, there you are. You have it straight in your face. Pexo, exonerating evidence within what is claimed to be the prosecution incriminating evidence. I won't take up my time by showing you the second speech, but there is one. If I have time at the end, I will show it to you. So if you add to that another 10 speeches out of the 20 speeches on which the prosecution rely in its document containing the charges, after all, we are in a court of law and we rely on evidence. And what is the evidence that's produced of these speeches? 20 of them. 10 of them, I submit, and we will show this in the substantive part of our submissions, contain exonerating evidence which support the defense case theory. In other words, if you add the 10 which we've identified in the prosecution's 20, to our total of 35, we come to 45 speeches versus 10, which we say support the use of force only in self-defense. That is 350% more speeches in favor of our defense and 354% more reasons not to confirm the charges. And you can bet your bottom dollar that at the end of today's proceedings, either the victim's self-styled legal assistant to ICC counsel or a prosecution intern will be tasked with scouring the web, looking for the means to prove Kaufman wrong. And I will declare it, and I'll declare it loudly and clearly, as if the prosecution didn't know it already. It's not enough to state that since the former president made those extremely inflammatory statements and deaths occurred, that he must, as a matter of course, be criminally responsible for those fatalities. At this stage of the proceedings, the prosecution needs to show substantial grounds to believe that the former president actually desired and foresaw that people would be killed as a result of his incendiary language. For the prosecution to assert that Rodrigo Duterte hoped for deaths to occur or was recklessly indifferent as to whether deaths would occur, which he was not, that's insufficient. So once more for the record, Rodrigo Duterte's language was aimed not at suspected drug pushers as the prosecution would have it, but directly at those poisoning society with their substances, and not, I stress, with lethal intent. His rhetoric was calculated to arouse fear and obedience, to instill fear in their hearts, and to inculcate a respect for the law in their minds. Nothing more, nothing less. That was his intent, and it was not criminal. And as many of these drug pushers demanded to enter prison, I remember seeing the images on the television, lining up to surrender and to enter prison. Now, I challenge my colleagues opposite to prove otherwise, because as we all know, in a criminal process, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. They brought this case and they need to prove it. Rodrigo Duterte need not convince the world of anything, and that is to his fortunate advantage given his current medical condition. He stands behind his legacy resolutely, and he maintains his innocence absolutely. Now, I turn to the general fairness and objectivity of the investigation, which, as we all know, is meant to be an impartial evidence-gathering exercise. As an ex-prosecutor myself, I'm used to investigating agencies pursuing all reasonable lines of inquiry, assimilating all testimonies, and digesting all documentation and forensic evidence, recommending who to target for prosecution, but not so with this prosecution. When we, the defense, study the course of the investigation in this case, one thing is plain as a pikestaff. The chief prosecutor of this court, Mr. Karim Khan, not only failed miserably to carry out his duties under the Rome Statute, requiring him to examine exonerating circumstances as well as incriminating, but he single-handedly contaminated it, so we alleged, by pursuing a one-track crusade with a view to a predetermined objective. Let me explain. Although the ICC officially authorized an investigation into the so-called Philippines situation in late 2021, it was deferred a few months later back to the Philippines for the official investigation to resume only in late 2023. But the real meat of the investigation into Count 1, relating to the activities of that fictitious construct, the Davao Death Squad, had effectively started way before then, with the sole objective of nailing Rodrigo Duterte. Indeed, all the way back in 2018, during its so-called preliminary examination, the prosecution had an individual who will be referred to as P1, handed to them on a silver platter. This P1 had been interviewed at an earlier date by none other than Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, in his former capacity as a private lawyer, and the self-professed legal
Mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation, nagpapatuloy pa rin ho ang confirmation of charges hearing dyan sa International Criminal Court. At sa pagkakataong itong nagsasalita ay ang lead counsel ni former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Dito ay ilang punto ang kanyang binabanggit kung saan ay pinatutunayan niya na ang karamihan sa mga pahayag ni former President Duterte ay makulay lamang ngunit hindi nangangahulugan ng isang krimen. Ang mga pahayag umano ay upang sindakin yung mga kriminal at hindi upang umabuso sa kanyang kapangyarihan. Bahagi po ng kanyang presentation yung mismong binabanggit kanina ng deputy head ng prosecution team at dito ay tinutukoy niya na yung ilan sa mga mabulaklak na pananalita ng dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte ang naging rason kung bakit napakarami ng mga criminal individuals ang kusang sumuko sa Duterte administration nung nanunungkulan ang dating Pangulo. Dito rin mga kabombo ay inungkat yung ilan sa mga kwento na nailahad kanina ng panig ng prosekusyon. At bahagi po yan ng presentation ng panig naman ng depensa. Gayunman, kung mapapansin po ninyo ay hindi nga presente dyan sa naturang confirmation of charges hearing si dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte dahil sumiti ho siya ng kanyang waiver na hindi na haharap o dadalo dito sa proceedings mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation. So bahagi pa rin po ito ng nagpapatuloy na confirmation of charges hearing at tatagal pa ito hanggang mamaya batay dun sa ating data na nakalap mula dyan sa International Criminal Court around 10 o'clock ng gabi magtatapos itong unang araw ng confirmation of charges hearing. And then bukas magkakaroon ho ng pagpapatuloy at haharap din yung iba pang mga kinatawan ng panig ng prosekusyon at depensa dito pa rin sa patuloy na paghimay ng kaso laban sa dating Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Binabanggit din mga kabombo nitong si Nicholas Kaufman na ang burden of proof ay nandun sa panig ng prosekusyon kaya kailangan patunayan ng panig ng prosekusyon yung kanilang mga inaakusa laban sa dating Pangulo at yan umano ay naniniwala sila na mahihirapan yung panig ng prosekusyon tungkol doon sa mga inaakusa o yung mga paratang laban sa dating presidente. So titignan natin mga kabombo kung papaano magiging development dito ho sa kasong ito ni former President Rodrigo Duterte. And later, of course, may mga makakausap din ho tayo hinggil naman sa iba pang mga usapin na nakapaloob pa rin sa bagay na ito. Mga kabombo, ang diferensya ho ng oras sa pagitan ng Pilipinas at ng Dahig ay 7 oras. Kaya ho ngayon ay tanghali na ho doon habang dito naman sa atin ay lumalalim na ho ang gabi bandang alas 8 na ho ng gabi dito sa Pilipinas and doon naman ay bandang hapon na. So ituloy natin ang yung proceedings mga kabombo.
The appeals chamber has now disqualified Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan from this case, a welcome development as a matter of ethical propriety, but in our opinion, too late in the day to salvage the integrity of the investigation that he had supervised. An investigation in the course of which he concealed his former role as the victim's counsel, who had deemed our client a suspected murderer as far back as 2018 and right up to the very day before this pre-trial chamber issued its arrest warrant. Your Honours, over the next few days, we hope to convince you of the wholly insufficient nature of the evidence against Rodrigo Duterte. We will show you that the paltry number of speeches on which the prosecution rely do not manifest criminal intent. We will also convince you that as hard as they tried, the prosecution's investigators couldn't get even one of its criminal cooperating witnesses, whose reliability is next to zero, to admit that they heard the former president, Rodrigo Duterte, give an order to kill at any time relevant to the charges, or with respect to any of the incidents. And we hope that when you conclude your deliberations, Your Honours, that you will dismiss these grievously misplaced and politically motivated charges. We will ask you to send Rodrigo Duterte back to his family, and we will ask you to give back to the Filipino people their tatay digong. Thank you, Your Honours.
The presiding judge. Thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. We shall now suspend. This is the end of initial statements, and this is the end of this morning's hearings. We will take a 90-minute break and resume at 2 in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Ayan mga kabombo at mga Kastar Nation, yung bahagi po na yan ng pre-trial process, pero ito ay confirmation of charges pa lamang, ay pansamantalahong itinigil muna, mga kabombo at mga ka-Star Nation. Magkakaroon na naman ng panibagong mahabang break para ho sa bago umusad itong proceedings dyan ho sa International Criminal Court. At mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, tayo'y patuloy na aantabay dito sa mga development hinggil ho dyan sa The Hague, kaugnay pa rin ng mga proseso. No? Medyo kakaiba yung mga proseso kumpara dito sa Korte sa Pilipinas. Kaya naman mga kabombo ay mainam na atin ho itong natutugay-gayan sa pamamagitan ng aktual na mga kaganapan dyan ho sa The Hague upang may paghambing natin dito sa mga proseso ng Korte sa Pilipinas upang tayo man ay magkaroon din ho ng kabatiran sa mga takbo ng mga kalintulad ho na sitwasyon dyan sa confirmation of charges hearing, and then later on ay magpapasya po sila kung tutuloy yung kaso ng reklamo laban dito kay former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, tutok lamang yung atin hong mga himpilan, manatili hong nakantabay sa mga development pa, at mag-unload muna tayo ng atin pong mga paalala, mga patalastas at mga pasabi mula ho sa ating mga sponsors, at tayo'y magtutuloy-tuloy ng mga update hanggang mamaya, mga kabombo, sa atin pong pagtutok pa rin dito sa kasong ito ng former president para sa mga karagdagan pang updates. At yan muna ang mga kaganapan na ating tinugay-gayan mula rito sa Bombo News Center, Makati. This is Bombo Radio Philippines, the #1 and most trusted source of news and information. Basta Radio, Bombo!
For the most trusted source of news and information, visit our website at www.bomboradio.com. Follow us on Bombo Radio mobile app, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter. Like, share, and stay connected. Anytime, anywhere.